it
Okay.
until he comes on.
Recording is on.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so we were saying we're waiting everybody for Dr. Kevin McCαιrn, and we're just discussing the last thing and the whole approach of what we're doing and stuff. And so, yeah, I hope he comes on. I don't know if he will, but yeah, the reason why there are only a few of us on is Gary said that basically I should just do this myself. I didn't want to say just, for a number of reasons, it just sends a message that it's like just me comes on. It's like I didn't think that was quite the right thing. So I thought, other people should be on too. But, just whether people want to be on or not, they should be on. But yeah, Gary doesn't want to be on. And so I think other people in general is like, but yeah, so I thought it was kind of going to be pretty much, us. What you see, the three of us here. Yeah. So what we're basically talking about is this is real dynamite stuff, and like I lost patrons over this, but I still want to pursue it because everybody talks about talking to the far right. I mean, all the crowd that I've targeted deliberately is on the left, and I don't see myself as left and right. I really do see myself as beyond politics. But I went to this thing from Burning Pink last night, and Roger Hallam's new political party in Britain, basically just a virtual pub thing. Sophie was there too, and the thing is, the guys are just such nice guys.
Oh, yeah.
Super nice.
But
they all say, like, we got to get beyond politics and stuff. And everybody agrees we got to get beyond politics. But it's so ironic that nothing is more left-wing than saying we got to get beyond politics. I mean, if you say we got to get beyond politics, it means left-wing. It's like, it's a trope, it's basically, it's a tribal signal to say, beyond politics, we are all beyond politics. I say, okay, if you are beyond politics, then talk to Kevin McCαιrn. No, we can't. He's a fascist racist. They say, like, oh, so you're not beyond politics, are you? It's a fucking lie. So none of these people are beyond politics. They middle of the road, left-wing, mainstream, and completely up to their necks in politics and identity politics. And so it's like, stop the lies, stop the crap. They all agree we have to stop lying, and we all have to get together and say, like, oh, well, put your money where your mouth is. Talk to the extreme right. Talk to the libertarian right. And so it's easy for all the left-wingers to, basically get in a room and, be accepting of each other, because they have the broad idea that, everybody should be one.
But there's no challenge. There's no challenge then.
There's no challenge, yeah. I mean, the left is at each other's throats, but it's just because they intellectualize and get into identity politics. So they're all egos bumping, but they never come up with an opposite ego. Wait a sec. I got to just catch it.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, actually join. Oh yeah. Actually, were you able to join the Burning Pink?
Yeah, I was in the Burning Pink. I had microphone problems. I couldn't join in. But I was listening to them. They were all talking about the experience. There was a really interesting guy who was living in the desert in a tent, and he was talking about prepping. He was in America. Do you remember that guy who came on?
Well,
and he was
talking about the rednecks coming and taking over his thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, but he was also, yeah, that's true. That's true.
But he was saying, like, but he couldn't talk to the rednecks. And I was saying, like, he's completely intolerant of the rednecks. Why? Because they're intolerant. It's like, pot meat cattle, man. It's like, so, yeah, the trip that I'm on is everybody has to get over their fucking ego. You have to make a bonfire of the vanities and all put our egos in. I want to try and show people how to do it. I mean, that's really hubris on my part, really arrogant to think I can pull this off.
Well, you had a great opening with Kevin. When you started to talk about South Africa, you suddenly got a sort of aura around you, and he was just completely, did you see that? Did you notice that, the last talk?
He was intrigued. He was intrigued. I saw.
I think he knows the problem well. I think he identifies with that. And it was a nice opening. And when you mentioned you had been army too, there was kind of, there was understanding. So, no, but I'm not saying that in an ironic way. But we have to find grounds where we can, if we want to exchange with people who are completely different from us, that we don't know, we have to find places where we have some kind of, common ground and then expand.
Yeah, but the thing is, everybody thinks we have to get along. We don't have to get along. It's like the lion does not have to lie down with the lamb. It's bullshit. It's a bullshit slave narrative that tell to slaves. It's basically all we have to do is basically get over ourselves. So it's basically you don't have to tolerate people. You just don't have to put other people in a fucking gas chamber. It's just a question of extremism. So you can understand anybody, absolutely anybody. It's like I had this thing when I was younger, and it actually still lasts today, but I couldn't bear it if I couldn't understand somebody. So I would get to like an interest in all these historical figures, because I go, but why the fuck does he do that? Why is he like that? I never thought of them as beyond the pale or anything like that. Until I could absolutely stand in their sandals, I wouldn't give up. So when I was about 15, then I got fascinated by Hitler. And I just, until I could absolutely understand Hitler, but I wouldn't let it go. I read Mein Kampf cover to cover. As a 15-year-old, you try read Mein Kampf. It's the worst fucking book ever written. And it's the most badly written book in the thing. No one's read it cover to cover. As 15, I read it to cover just because I read Alan Bullock's History of Hitler. It was a definitive Hitler, biography of Hitler. It's about yay thick. There's a lot of demanding shit for it, but I gradually, every step of the way, if I got to a point where, Hitler did something and I couldn't understand it, I couldn't imagine myself doing it for the same motivations, then I'd stop and think about it and try. And eventually I cracked Hitler, and I fully understood exactly where he was at. And I got to the end of Alan Bullock's biography. And this is, Alan Bullock is still, I think, today recognized as the world's expert on Hitler, his historian. And I got to the end of it, and his closing thing was, the more he studied Hitler, the less he understood him. And I went, oh, fuck, that's I took that really badly, because I was like, I completely understood him. By the end of Alan Bullock's book, I completely and utterly understood Hitler. And so that really disturbed me. I thought, this is the one that he doesn't understand, and the more I understood, studied it, the more I understood him. But yeah, it gave me a few sleepless nights thinking, oh my fuck, what does this mean that I understand Hitler? But I did that with everybody. I did exactly the same thing with Churchill and stuff. And then I gradually, figured shit out that way. But yeah, you've got to put yourself in other people's sandals. All the stuff is an old cliche, right? It's all about the old cliches. The golden rule and turning it's all that crap. The problem is nobody can hear it. They're all platitudes and cliches, and everybody can say, well, you've got to put it, until you've walked in, a mile in someone else's sandals, you can't criticize. There's like no one can hear it now, because it's all just blah, 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 blah. No one actually goes to no Jew I know has ever gone to try and understand Hitler. You know what fucking victory that would be? If you're Jewish and you're Orthodox and you're really into Judaism, and you go and you try and see and say, like, okay, stop this demonizing of Hitler. Just say Hitler's an ordinary guy. How did he get where he got to? It's like, there we'll get somewhere. But people just go like Hitler, and
there is some Jewish people who did analyze Hitler through the works of Alice Miller, who's a psychoanalyst from Switzerland, and she gathered in her wake a few studies on his childhood and his upbringing, and it was on his personality more than his politics, but there was some, but it was very bizarre. Yeah.
But there's no understanding, right? They just find why the reasons he was a monster and not me is really what it is. It's like saying, like, nobody writes a book saying, I'm a Jew, I finally understand Hitler.
Yeah, because he hasn't visited his shadow. So, I mean, if you know, and that's the big thing. But I find that you're absolutely right, because little groups like this on the internet, like, well, Kevin is a big group, but other groups like that tend more and more, because of the COVID thing, to continuously meet in this little closed identity exchange. And they don't, there's less and less communication between different ways of thinking. It's just, like even Burning Pink yesterday, it was nice to hear people sharing their experience, but they were, you know, the thing about the prison and the fines and XR stuff. It was nice to hear people actually talking about, but it was going unchallenged, because they reinforce each other. They have a narrative that they are following tacitly without even talking about it. And it's just, you have little signs of recognition to show that you belong to this kind of way of, there's a few words that you will not say, or a few things that you will not. I'm lucky my microphone didn't work yesterday evening, because I was all geared up to, to not put my foot in it, but I just, you know, I wanted to follow what you said about the debt strike, and they didn't seem to pick on that at all, you know.
Yeah, it was just basically a buddy fest. So it was, you know, but the same is with Kevin is, you know, it's a locker room thing. It's a boys' locker room thing, and I don't think he's got a single girl follower. So he's lost 50% of his audience just right there. I mean,
why did he lose 50% of his followers?
Because 50% of potential followers are women.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You see, a lot of what's going on here is the fact that we don't have any initiations anymore. You see, you used to have these phases, and you would do exactly what I'm doing, is basically a kind of a birthing process into adulthood. But what the system has done deliberately is made people infantile for purpose. Basically, the purpose is to groom them to be an obedient debt slave. So the system infantilizes people deliberately to make them obedient. I know this because we did it in South Africa. I mean, my background I've mentioned many times, and essentially I'm a latter-day slave owner. Basically, we kept African servants in peonage. You know, basically, they weren't literally slaves because we gave them a stipend, but that stipend only bought the stuff a slave would have anyway, and that's basically, we gave them food, and then they just had enough to buy clothes and a few essentials. So if they were slaves, they would have that same amount. Basically, we spent less money on them than if they were slaves, because we didn't have the capital cost up front of buying them. But essentially, they were bonded to us. Once you had a servant, a male, a gardener or a female housemaid, they were essentially bonded to you for life. They couldn't really, you know, they didn't have the option of switching their labor because it was so precious to have one of the jobs. So I'm just saying that they were, you know, basically slaves. And worse, peons are actually in a worse state than slaves. But we kept, and I mean, we in South Africa and the whites, middle and upper classes, the moneyed whites, were actually all whites were moneyed, really. We kept them infantilized. And if you speak to people that saw the end of apartheid, there was a definite point where people realized that this was the end. This was the end of apartheid, and where the tipping point was when black people stopped being infantilized. So there got to be a point, basically the system reinforces that you must doff your cap and say, yes, sir, no, sir, because if you're obedient, that's the best strategy for surviving this intolerable trauma of peonage and slavery. So if you're obedient and you are subservient, that's the best strategy. So the system tries to force that and reinforce that as the best path. Your best strategy in life is to obey. And so then, they build up a tradition in slaves of doffing the cap and showing subservience and going, cowering, and then that's the best survival strategy. And it works for the system because it's the least expenditure for keeping them under control. So it's in essence, you show them the best strategy is self-control. And then, the idea that is reinforced, that they're like, yes, sir, no, sir, and that's this childish thing where they try and act like babies. It's basically a pack wolf thing where the little cub, lies supine all the time, say, don't, and bears its neck. So it's this neck-bearing thing that basically is the best survival strategy as a black person in this intolerable situation. And the system then reinforces that because it's cheap. It's a cheap form of control. So we knew that it was the end of the road when they stopped being subservient. So I was just talking recently, in fact, to a Greek guy, a Greek South African, and he owned a gas station, and he said he knew the end of apartheid had come because there was this guy, big Boer Afrikaner, got into an altercation with this black guy in a car, and the script that should have gone down, this big fucking loafing troglodyte. Kevin.
Apologies, people. I'm very sorry, and the only excuse I have was that I nodded off. Can you hear?
Hey,
can you hear me?
We are recording. Okay, so just we are.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so but anyway, go ahead. I'm glad you came on.
Yes, I had everything sketched out this afternoon. Been actually, funnily enough, looking at. This is odd that well, we're working on a platform extension for streaming, and I'm using that platform right now, and I'm not sure why that exactly is, but at least it seems to be working. We've got a real world test in why that is. So that's kind of interesting. So I can tell my network expert that his ninja skills have worked. This is. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
you just can't see me, right?
We can't see you. You can't. We can't. Your camera's muted.
Right. That's because I've got 1,000 instances of this. The back end of this software running that's using up the camera right now. Just bear with me and I stopped short the troubleshooting for this. Like I say, it's all part of trying to get around the censorship that I have all this running right now.
Okay.
So just on the censorship question, we've got to find some code words for
I had a good one earlier. Actually, I don't know if you saw the stream I did earlier with Kev Baker, but Michelle Pfeiffer for the Pfizer, and I guess
Who's Michelle Pfeiffer? Okay.
So the virus is just the virus, right?
And for AstraZeneca?
Yes, depends. And our cousins in the Middle East, I don't know particularly what you would like to call them.
Which
And
one?
No, I don't think. Are they? I mean, like the JIHAD is not a no. But if Allah Akbar is okay, isn't it?
I hope so. I use it. I use it a lot.
I just said it. I don't think that's a keyword. I think
Well, but we need a list of the words to code for, because I think the algorithm I've picked on a big amount of words. I started doing a list of the words and you started to put Greek letters in vaccine or in things like that, and I think that's very good.
Well,
Even
I think that was one. I think the V word is one.
But to include foreign fonts is enough to completely defy the algorithm, because you can put a Greek letter or and I'm not going to say an Arabic letter because it's a bit complicated, even though I have it on my keyboard. But you can put Hebrew, Greek, whatever. Do you know? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, there are loads of things that will defeat the bots. But yeah, just in general, I'm really, really pleased that they're starting this censorship, because this is exactly where we went in South Africa. It's a huge mistake. I can't believe that they're such amateurs at this game, because it's such a rookie mistake they're making that you kind of wonder if it isn't like reactionary, or it's deliberate. It's it's a COINTEL-op, because they know enough psychology to know that people start developing their own keywords and stuff like we're doing now, which makes it a cultish atmosphere. The Cults 101 is to make your own lingo and build up these borders of separation. And so it's free radicalization for people. They're basically saying, now you have to radicalize. And you're like, thanks very much. I was really struggling to radicalize people before you. So it's saying, hey, now this is forbidden fruit, which now basically makes it exciting. It's like, thank you. It's basically, and it brings up the barriers. And it's like, well, couldn't have done it better myself. Thanks a lot. And it's so easy to get around, and with little tricks and stuff. So what happens from here on out is you get into a dialogue with the state. And so the state starts escalating and eventually figures out, the bots will eventually figure out that people are doing and stuff like that. And then it forces you to get cleverer. And what's happening is the Hobbes' Leviathan, or the resistance Leviathan, is getting smarter and evolving and getting more radical. And it's all good. It's all good. So thank you, big tech. I didn't know you were such clueless bucket idiots.
Well, you've got the
censorship in World War II. That's what happened in France. The codes, the radios. That's what made the resistance big. Is that Vichy started to censor everything. Every time during the Algerian movement, every time censorship is going. You're right. You're right. It's completely playing in our game anyway. Because I mean, I think so much more censorship, please. More censorship.
Yeah, it's just human nature to say, like, I'm not allowed to hear that. Yeah. It's like, I have to hear that. Well, what is it that I'm not allowed to hear? It's like,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's very ape. That's very ape.
Can you guys hear me?
You know.
Can you guys?
Yeah, we can hear.
Yeah, I might have to reboot if I can't find the process that's holding the camera right now, which I'm not having much luck.
Don't sweat it. I mean, you're coming across fine on audio, so it doesn't. Yeah, it's fine if you're actually on muted camera.
I'm just I hate being defeated by tech like this. If I can't if I can't beat this, then what hope is there for the future? Maybe this is it. Yeah, and this is.
I'm a recovering engineer. It's the tech is hopeless. This.
I think I have it.
You'll drive yourself mad.
Oh yeah, trust me. Hey, there we go.
You're on 5 barrels now. Great.
Yeah.
All the cylinders. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. So just in terms of, I want to upload the video. So if we just try not to keyword ourselves into a YouTube takedown.
Yeah. Look, the key things that I know is the Michelle Pfizer. Anything around that, Michelle Pfeiffer. Sorry. They will take that down very, very quickly. And I had a friend yesterday that had 3-4 channels taken out, even if they didn't have strikes, because he had been mentioning the Michelle Pfeiffer and all to do with Michelle Pfeiffer. So I be very, very careful in this respect. And that wasn't a live, that was a sort of retrospective banning. And like I say, he's one of his channels was just he has a sort of fascination with supernatural stories, Bigfoot, things like that. That didn't have any strikes, and they decided that he was that was too much, and so it was a punitive takedown, I guess. Try to hammer the message home, which is disturbing. And the
oh yeah, go on. Sorry, I didn't...
well, I was going to move on to there was I don't know if you follow the case of Owen Benjamin and Patreon, and they took him off, right? So he's being sued in Californian courts right now. Actually, this is a glimmer of hope that they took him down, not for stuff that he did on Patreon, but for a joke that he said on Twitter about the, what was the example they give? Something to do with Me Too movement, I think. So I can't remember the details of such, but the tech companies are taking it upon themselves to police the internet in this fashion. And
it was voter suppression, right? He got he made some things about the not Diebold, but the other guys who make the voting machines, wasn't it? And then they sued him for freaking billions. I think.
Owen Benjamin? No, his was just so his story arc was one of, he spoke out against them using hormones on children, puberty blockers, that type of thing. He was, I don't know, relatively successful comedian in Hollywood. I mean, I've done a few streams about him, and I've had people come and speak about him because he went down this route of going at conspiracy theories, looking at conspiracy theories, and sort of he would just rant in his back garden about them. And I followed it because of, I'd seen him on Joe Rogan, and then he went with this. He started this. He was well. I can't talk because of Twitter, but I've lost quite a few accounts now. But he would say that, you know, people targeting children for the woke movement, that they would think that children can make that type of decision. Obviously not in the, they're not thinking correctly. And yeah, as
gender alteration and stuff in like prepubescence and stuff, right?
Yeah, it's, and what do you have? You have this, oh bravo, it's stunning and brave as the children are mutilated basically. And well, it's a form of psychological abuse, I would argue. And
that's probably the end of the road for woke. I mean, that is a, no one's going to go with this. This is a foul you're not going to get out of, right? They really have gone beyond the pale on this one. So
well,
this is the limit.
It's you would think so, right? But then, you know, I mean, I'm critical of them a lot, but you know, with some of the last holdouts in the UK was the Muslim community, as they tried to put in the books for same-sex parents, but primary school age, and I think this was in, I think it was in Birmingham, and they had a parents were striking basically and taking the kids out of school, and yeah, you know, it didn't get the news coverage that you think it would have with you know, you were playing diversity poker at that stage, and you know who was coming out on top. Well, they're not a minority Muslims, but I guess they are in the UK. But those who would engage in gender dysphoria, and there's a very disturbing component in neuroscience, which is using the field of neuroscience and the plasticity of children as a battering ram to force through this sort of woke culture premise, and it's a how would you say? Hang on a second. I just need to quickly.
Yeah, I mean, they're well recognized as phases when kids are growing up, right? They will go through gender dysphoria. So if you know, it's a kind of natural that you explore sexuality. But if you fix one by surgery or something like that, that's one of those irreversible steps that's just kind of unforgivable.
Well, it doesn't have to be surgery, and you know, this is something that I've spoken about. I mean, I don't have time to get into it, but you know, I know one of the sort of main protagonists behind this, Daphne Yuel. She's an Israeli neuroscientist, and what they found was that there's they can look at functional magnetic resonance imaging on, and you know, this is, if you want to get into sort of like shooting down the theory, I can tell you that Tel Aviv is not the it's not the best place for pulling a sample from, and especially in sort of a younger demographic. But you know, we understand that there are traits that are expressed differently, but in order for you to get, you know, from the child age to the male age, you know, you have this, you've got to be plastic to some degree, because you don't know exactly what environment you're going to be popped into, right? And so, you know, there's some sort of survival mechanism there that they're essentially keying onto, and you know, children need to explore to find those, what's their, you know, what makes them them. And they're using this idea that, well, it's blurry, this mosaic which seems to define male and female somewhat. It does cluster, you know, there are traits that are different, but because there's this plastic stage in the young, they think that they can get in there, and it's the right thing to do to encourage children to explore out these things, where I would argue that because it's so plastic and malleable, that's the time where you should be making the differences as concrete as possible. And it's a dangerous argument to be saying that we know best with respect to nature, and how we should be nurturing the nature of our children in this case. And like I say, we've seen it reach peak absurdity with, well, you know, puberty blockers and the pronouns and little children that are being put up in front of groups, and you know, the videos that you see are so they're disturbing to me. But when little 6-7-year-olds are saying that they identify as the other sex, is yeah, we've reached a point now where we're coming at well, you think that coming at children the way they have so openly, that would be the point at which it would snap people out of the woke, well, the monster. It is, because it's preying Moloch. It's Moloch preying on children, and oops.
Yeah, I agree with that. So yeah, my take on it is that you should be hands off at that stage. I was hands off with my kids, and so what you're saying about exploring. Well, I think what the organism is doing is exploring its environment at that time. And so you want to let it adjust to the environment and whatever nature decided. And but they're enforcing the cultural narrative on the kids' development. So I think it goes both ways. I don't think you want to intervene at that stage to reinforce one gender or the other.
No, you should just let the children be. But you need to set an environment that's conducive to making the roles that are necessary for propagation. So for them to turn around and say, oh, there's, you know, so why are there so many more, how would you say, sexually confused youngsters right now? And I would say this feeds into the nihilism. You see a lot of this, mental health disorders, etc. There's not that there's there's an argument that, oh, there's like 20% of the population is homosexual or of some sort of fluid interaction between. Those figures are absolute nonsense. It's not something that we see replicated in the natural world. Yes, you can force pair coupling in a zoo, for example, or in where animals will lose out in the mating hierarchies, but given the choice, and you offer a proper mate in those circumstances. Usually nature will follow the course. And like I say, we've been well, we've gone real deep real quick, right? with this
we do that, it's allowed on this.
Okay, so
on a lighter note, there was where I live in Ireland, there was a tradition that lasted up until the 60s, 70s, because some guys of my age got it, is that when the baby was born and until the boy was born, in certain families, especially in the fishing communities around here, until they were about 3 or 4, they were dressed like girls. They were put on little dresses and with lace and everything, because the fairies were known to come and take the boys. They wouldn't leave. They would leave the girls alone. And no, it's just a little anecdote, because I've explored a little bit, the meaning of that. And I mean, there's a lot of interpretation. It goes back to old Celtic, traditions and the fairies and all that. But I think there's also a symbol in there of the ambiguity of children growing up and the different paths they can follow. And this kind of protection from the fairies might be a protection from some kind of intervention that's too heavy-handed. It's
priests,
just so interesting. This
Catholic priests in Ireland.
Yeah, it's a protection against the fairies. Are the priests?
The fairies,
the priests are metaphor for the priests. Yeah,
but the fairies, it's different. It's very different, because the fairies here are like the devas in India. The fairies are creatures of the land. They're creatures that live in different hidden places, and they can come out and attack people or take things, but if you leave them alone, they don't do anything to you, and you can trick them. So there's a lot of symbols in there. It's not a subject of our talk. But
by my way of thinking, all those kind of things are metaphorical, and they're metaphorical for the parts of our own brain. So whenever you see any kind of mythological thing, people are really talking about parts of our own psychology.
Yeah,
so when they say something like, fairies, then everybody thinks, oh, mythological. And you should not. You should think more in concrete terms and think literally fairies. And so you think like it's to protect them from the fairies. The fairies are going to do gender alteration. That's exactly what the fairies in woke culture are basically harming these kids. So it's like you must think of it in far more literally than mythological.
No, I know,
but put a mythological spin on it because it makes it acceptable. And but these are fairies in like what we would call fairies. And so it's the same in Jewish culture that they won't say anything nice about a baby, because if you say anything complimentary about somebody's baby, you'll leave it open to the spirits to come and grab it. But I just wanted to say, Kevin, that surely it's not worth getting bent out of shape about this, because apart from the ethical things about the kids, which is pretty awful, but this is a self-healing problem, because none of these people are going to breed, right? I mean, what you're doing in those circumstances is it's a castration narrative, right? What they, in essence, doing is turning all these kids, they're going to be turned female. I mean, if there's nobody gets little girls and really turns them into boys. This is all about getting boys and turning them into girls. And in any way you look at it, is a culture that does that. If they enforce that plastic stage and enforce woke culture on it, it tends towards lack of breeding. So they're breeding themselves out of the population.
Well, that's a difficult, from a sort of evolutionary and selective standpoint. It's true that there's a constant churn of maladaptive behavior, let's say, and it's let's say 1%. I think it's probably more about that figure rather than the 20%. So how do these people get how does it keep propagating through the generations? And the obvious thing is that it's through abuse and subversion that they want to carry forward, and so that's why they come after your children. But if the numbers were 20%, that's enough to induce a population collapse anyway, if their figures were right. And right now, I guess how catastrophic is the nihilistic trajectory that where's it going to sort of, are we still arcing up on the ballistic trajectory and then coming down at a even faster rate of knots, or are we is it more sort of like rifle ballistic?
No, the statistics are we're in a precipitous decline in the Western tradition. So if you take Jewish people, I mean, I think the reproduction rate is amongst kind of secular Ashkenazi Jews about 1.6, something like that, which is collapsed in 3 generations.
In Ashkenazim Jew, I mean, that's not what I saw in Israel when I was there. They have, the Orthodox.
No, the Orthodox is the opposite. The Orthodox are breeding like rabbits. So in non-Orthodox Jews, they're basically disappearing very, very fast. And so it's a very strange narrative. I actually wanted to talk to you about this because you mentioned, I don't know if JEW. Is that a keyword?
Jays. Just say Jays. I'm not so sure. It's that much of a. It depends what you tag onto it, right? And if you're standing there, calling for their.
Yeah, we get it. Okay, so but you know, the thing I wanted to call you on is, you know, mentioning basically just on anti-Semitism, because I don't think there's any point, because for one thing, they're disappearing. Basically, the strange thing about Israel and Zionism, it has no future just demographically, because the Orthodox Jews are breeding, but the Orthodox Jews, and very fast, their reproduction rate is high, but there's so few Orthodox Jews now that the majority of Jews are really in a population decline, extreme population decline. And so there's no way that Zionists can hold on to Israel. I don't know why nobody mentions demographics in Israel, but the reason why the Israelis were doing this dual use research, basically sterilization, you know, female immunization to sperm, South Africa was doing it on their behalf, and basically it's an ethnic bioweapon. But the reason why both countries were doing it, because we were both in the same demographic squeeze. And so it's not only the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, it's actually in Israel itself. There's so many Arabs now that they have to make a choice, sort of already. They have to make a choice. Is they have to give up democracy or lose Israel. Or they basically have, you know, bioweapons and stuff and try to reduce the population, which is probably already being left a bit late. So it is literally the end of Israel. Within three generations, Israel is gone. I think
so this is
anyway, because climate change is going to get us. But I know you don't believe that.
Well, so I have this to add. Okay, it's very telling that Israel is the first Western nation that's showing all the worst excesses of what comes out of the release of these dual-use agents, which is the digital tracking. So people coming into Israel now have to wear tracking bracelets, etc. And it's so everyone that thinks, oh, it's the Jews in that context where it's a blanket statement, and missing the point entirely. I think that, you know, if you want to, it's Pharisees, if you want to sort of wind it back in history, and they've continued for a long time, and those Pharisees don't actually care that much. They see other Jewish individuals just probably a little higher up the scale than the Goyim, basically just at a fundamental operating level. But like I say, the people thinking that they're hey, keep the noise down. They're acting as a functional unit, all in lockstep, etc. The only thing that they're doing is that they have this in-group selection, and I'm changing in-group to lineage selection. And this just from listening to Brett Weinstein the other day. It's a better descriptor than in or collective, or those groups that work through sort of collectivism, and the woke culture is in that type of selection. And sorry.
Group
So
selection.
there's groups. Yeah, group selection it's one way of doing it, but in group is a it's not as precise as the idea of lineage selection, right? So what's that? When you say in group, what does that mean? Well, people in your bowling club, or are you or is there something more fundamental to it? And you know, lineage selection is something that's more fundamental. It coins the biological better, and that's the inherent component of, or the paradox of Judaism, right? Is that one, they masquerade as a religion of one step. The other is that they have a inward looking lineage selection pressure through the mother. And so it's not a religion that or you can convert, but it's very difficult. And so they have this selection pressure, or the lineage selection, which enables them to build something of a buffer. But you could argue that there's a kernel within that, let's, for sake of example, because you need to be able to use language that's not too technical, but that say that's a direct continuation from the Pharisees, those that rejected Christ, for example, and were if you believe the Catholics were the subject of God's wrath and the destruction of Jerusalem, etc., and they were dispersed, but they continued to maintain the church or the religious aspect through, I can't remember
the money lenders, right? They basically
yeah.
But
yeah, go on.
But okay, so Jews are insular in orthodoxy, but the general Jews are getting less orthodox, and the secular Jews, particularly the ones in Western liberal democracies, they are marrying outside the out group in an exponential rate. So they're not being preserved as an insular group anymore in terms of ancestry and lineage.
Well, you've got to be careful here.
Jews that are left, and there are fewer and fewer of those in terms of.
But in Israel, though, this is something that this is the only country that allows this, right? If you're non-Jewish, you're not allowed to marry an Israeli in Israel. They make you go out of the country, not or convert. But if you can marry, but you have to go outside of the country, get married somewhere else, and then they'll kind of recognize that you're a couple to be established as a couple inside of Israel. Okay, so they're forcing the selection pressure within the country itself in that manner, and they're the only country in the world that does that and is allowed to. Well, Muslim countries have the same with. You try marrying a Muslim girl.
No, even in Greece, there's the opposite for the Orthodox Church. The only Abrahamic religions are allowed in Greece, and they also, until recently, you couldn't really marry a Greek that way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, but my point is that it's diluting. That kind of thing is diluting because in non-Orthodox Jews, the rate of basically having kids out of wedlock is about the same as or actually more than say secular Christians in Western liberal democracies. So the marriage leading to kids is not really a big thing except outside Orthodox Jews. So what you're saying really apply there.
So here's the view towards that would say, so if you look at Agenda 2020, 2030, and like I said, I'm not saying I really ascribe to these particular viewpoints, but there's a push towards automation, and the technology for automation runs across all levels, especially military. Some of Israel's greatest, be careful how you put this. So,
Israel's greatest hits. Khashoggi is one of Israel's greatest hits.
But they're funneling US technology to China, and again, this would be an area that I would just defer to Brendan O'Connell to. I mentioned him last week, the Belt and Road Initiative, that the idea that we're in this accelerated environmental collapse, I would argue, is a warping of what's called the One Health doctrine. The idea that there's this the human beings are this problem on the planet, and once you understand One Health, you understand its origins in the biowarfare programs, and it's got this very long pedigree, and you sort of see the
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're referring to, Kevin. I've missed a link there. What's the link between the belief of the human responsibility in the environmental collapse and One Health? Sorry, because can you clarify that for me?
Yeah. So One Health is this. So I would argue that environmentalism, that the creed of environmentalism, the idea that the ecosystems are on the point of irreversible decline, is an extension of this One Health doctrine, which you see once you start looking into the scientific literature, it pervades all of ecological thinking, and it's this idea that you're going to manage each of these. It's a triad of components: human, environment, and animal. And within their target zone is within the middle, and it starts out as a who wouldn't want cleaner air, cleaner water, etc., etc. But it takes one of those components and it can be weaponized, like bio. The biome can be weaponized. That these institutes are using, and they've weaponized the information so much that they want populations thinking, oh, there's no point in the future, right? And you can argue if that's coming to, looking towards this idea of Agenda 2020, Agenda 2030, and I don't like to sort of say, oh, this is exactly the UN's doing right now, etc., with 2020, but where the world spun on its axis in 2020, right? And they're aiming at manageable populations by 2030, right? And how are they going about this managed decline? Well, you can take each one of those parts of the One Health doctrine, and like I say, just Google One Health, right? And look at the images that start coming up, and then start going into the scientific literature, and then see how it ties into groups like EcoHealth and these. Hey, big boy. Yes. Daddy needs you to play downstairs.
We're getting a bit off topic here.
Yeah, it's circuitous, but there's a point that I want to get to. So, okay. There's this concept of the Belt and Road Initiative, right? So Israel is going to be, or the Jewish state, so let's think Lord Rothschild and these types of bloodline families, the usurers, okay, they want to pivot back. So they want to divide up into this Eurasian supercontinent. So China is the factory of the world. That plan went perfectly with Kissinger from the 70s. Okay, we gutted ourselves of all our industries and heavy industries, and everything's got moved off to hey, you, quiet, or go downstairs. Did you hear what I said? Sorry about that. So we've gutted ourselves of our industries, and we turned ourselves into service economies and usury economies, right? Because it's all built on financial financial tools that make no sense. But there's a core group that are benefit from them. Enough. Go. Sorry about that.
But the core group is I mean, Jews are overrepresented in that core group.
But it's not just Jews. No. They're overrepresented, and it's not just Jews, unfortunately. And people.
Right, but what's the common theme? Because what I think the common theme is, it's urbanization. If you're looking at your Pharisees and stuff like that, is the urban environment has centralized and fast bred us for a kind of psychopathy. And so you can measure it IQ. IQ is kind of an indirect reference to psychopathy. And so I think this narrative that they have on the left saying, when you come to Urshery, right, they're saying, well, Jews got into money lending because that was the only profession they were allowed. Like if you go back to Shylock and you go to the Merchant of Venice, then they say, well, it was forced on them because, basically Christians were forbidden by the Catholic Church to engage in Urshery. So, but you could do it across religious lines. So, the guys were excluded from guilds, so then basically they got into Urshery out of desperation because there was no other way to earn a living. And so it's like, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. But there is an element of truth in it because I think outside of Eastern Europe, Jews were forced into an urban setting. Outside of the kulaks and things like that in Russia and Eastern Europe, that
from the 13th century, they were not allowed to own land in the country.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but that forced them into a service economy and basically into urbanization. But I think it's urbanization that does it. And so that's, if you look at the common thread, and I mean, okay, I'll tell you personally now that, I have no problem stereotyping Jews, because I think we've got to get beyond all this bullshit and get to the bottom of this. I just share something personally because, we're heading in such dangerous territory just discussing this. And I think, I want to try and show people that you can discuss this, and it doesn't mean that, we're heading for Auschwitz. It's basically, I think we need to start really discussing openly and have discussions like this to show people that you can discuss these forbidden subjects without it turning into, the Holocaust. And I think the way we're going with wokeism is the way to the Holocaust. It's the way to the next Holocaust. And I think unless we discuss this properly, and first thing that's got to go is this ban on stereotyping. Because here's my personal story: is that my dad was a bussman, and he was ruined by this Jewish partner. And
surprise!
So he told me, it's like, don't go into business with Jewish partners. I did it twice. They took me down exactly the same way. Basically, my Jewish partners, all the stereotypes, they ganged up. I was the goy. They acted like predatory animals, like a predatory pack, and they took me down legally, not because they had any legal case. It was predatory legislation. They basically use it as a tactic to arm wrestle you into the ground. So they took over my company. So I was, I'm not prejudiced. And so basically I got taken down twice. So you would say that if there's anybody who's supposed to be anti-Semitic, it should be me. But I don't see it that way. You see, I was taken down by another partner, much the same way, who wasn't Jewish. But he was kind of the Jewish stereotype. He was kind of Shylock by accident, not by heritage. He was an English guy. And in every single case, where I came down to analyzing it is, if you go further back, take it into prehistory, this kind of behavior doesn't happen in hunter-gatherer societies. I mean, hunter-gatherer societies are very diverse, but this kind of predatory behavior just isn't there. And where it comes in is urbanization. So I think that what's to blame, and where it really pops out is like from Göbekli Tepe, 10,000 years ago, you can see it going through Sumer. And then by the time you get to the Pharisees, they're an offshoot of these, urban mindset. And so so if you follow through with this, it's saying that it's the urban mindset, which I'd call like the alien cortex is my phrase for it. But I'd say that the Jews are more urban. The Ashkenazi Jews score very, very high in IQ. And IQ is kind of a way of measuring how urban you are. If you want to be politically correct, and people, hate IQ, on the left because of Isaac and stuff, they just shoot him down because it's too politically charged about IQ. But they claim that an IQ, the politically correct way to get around the difficult subject that Jordan Peterson goes into and stuff about IQ, is to just say, well, it's a measure of how modern you are. Well, we increasingly urbanized, and the modern equates to basically urban. So we're breeding ourselves in this kind of fast breeder reactor, and it's all based on this attraction towards an urban center. So if you follow that through, you say, yeah, it's the urbanization is the problem, and it just so happens the Jews are more urbanized, so they show these traits more. So what do you think of
that? Well, again, how much is nature and nurture, and how much? Look, I've been burnt by by the traits that you're describing whilst in Israel, which was, and there was this, let's say, the lineage selection, and they didn't mind taking and stealing stuff that wasn't theirs if they thought it was sort of propagate them forward. And
Lebensraum, they believe in Lebensraum, which is the most ironic thing known to man.
Yeah, and like I say, the paradox of Jewry is playing out right now in the in front of our screens. They are the ones that have been essentially forced into mass vaccination. They are the ones that are being forced into carrying the passports and basically having to live as a second-class citizen in their urban environments. So what are their big urban environments? There's Tel Aviv, there's Haifa, and Jerusalem. And there's not that much else in terms of big cities. They're sort of conurbations generally of Tel Aviv or.
Yeah, but I have been to Israel too, and I what you say about urban concentration is right. But the whole state has an urban mentality. The country is tiny. If you go to, there's not. I mean, apart you can talk about the kibbutz, okay, but that's a tiny little minority of collective experiences over there that I visited actually. But with the you know the size of the country you're talking about. You know, it's all urban as in urban way of living. There is even in the tiny little towns, people don't have a rural lifestyle. They don't have a community, collective, mutual aid, nothing like that. It's all centralized, and that's I think I think I that's what you meant, Hugh, about urban too, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the kind of, to sum up what I'm trying to propose here is just in terms of your channel and basically your project is, I think saying stuff against Jews is hiding to nothing, because basically it's an ethnicity, and nobody can change their ethnicity. So
yeah, I mean, I try to use it more for comedic.
Is an idea. So go after the idea, because people can change their ideas. Zionism is basically Jewish fascism. It's the not even the other side of Nazis. Basically, the Zionists are Nazis, but the folk is Jews instead of Germans. But they're National Socialists. But so go after Zionism, which is an idea, and it's an idea that's falling out of favor. Increasingly in America, Jews are not supporting the Zionists. They're getting more and more disillusioned with Zionism. So the idea is going, and that's a damn good thing. But there's no point in focusing on ethnic Jews, because they can't change their ethnicity. And
I tend to come at
demographics say they're being whittled down anyway. So just go for Zionism, don't go for Jews.
It's the shock factor and comedic factor for me. I know I'm with you that it's the idea of Jewish Lebensraum that's the problem here. But there's a corollary to that, which is they got their Lebensraum, right? They're Greater Israel. They achieved it. It's not the footprint on the ground. It's the footprint in the air, right? Greater Israel exists in the air because it's their ability to project their air force over at as they see fit, where they want to, and engage with other elements that they would want to that they would rather stoke tensions with. But again, this is where you've got to get into the modern the 21st century of thinking, and about how much is about the Belt and Road Initiative and the pivot towards China, and how Israel wants to be sitting at the middle of this the bunting cloverleaf map, and you've got Eurasian supercontinent, Africa, and the southern hemisphere, and then the American North and South America as the other leaf of that map. And it's Benjamin Netanyahu is up there now talking about Israel being a global superpower in terms of spying, or, like the Five Eyes are. And he's up there saying that they might not be number one, but they're sort of number two, number three, and so now there are 6 eye nations, and a lot of so the server technology being built on is built on Intel backbones essentially across the globe, and all of those chips are backdoored. There's a little there's a little it's under the BIOS.
Everything, yeah. It's basically there's this
I forget what it's called. There's something ME. It's called. It's like Intel ME.
The micro edition. So basically, the Intel micro edition is basically the microcode inside the chip, but since the beginning, those chips have been had backdoors in it, and that's why the what's going on with 5G in that is a technology war. That basically there's this cyber war that's going on, and it's very difficult to make CPUs and GPUs. You need a long run up. The technology that Intel has got is such a broad lead that China can't catch up. So what their strategy was they would go into telco and start doing 5G and telco chips, and then kind of circumvent the CPU hegemony. But the undercurrent of all this is that all those backdoors that mean everybody knows in the military that we're going to war, and the reason why we haven't gone to war yet is because they're sorting out this chip war, and basically everybody knows that day one of World War III, everybody flips a switch and finds out how basically embedded they are in each other's chips, and planes start falling out of the sky because they haven't been able to get like a fighter jet, like the F-22, that's completely free of compromised technology. So they can't go to war because nobody knows how many backdoors there are in this kind of software. But they're sorting it out. The danger of 5G and stuff, and the chip war, this chip shortage that's going on now, is because of espionage. They're trying to separate the two out. It's a very bad thing because as soon as they separate it out, you assume that China's going to go and invade Taiwan.
Well, but this is the thing that when you start understanding, when you put the lens of the Belt and Road Initiative on, okay, so you see that Russia, China, and Israel are pivoting one way, and the stands are part of that infrastructure and those trading routes that are going to come through. The plan is to come through. They've got land, sea routes, etc. And Israel sort of sitting at the center of it. And there was, it wasn't that long ago that it's been so out the headlines for a few months, I've forgotten his name, but the Secretary of State Pompeo went to Israel and said, "Hey, you've got to knock it on the head. This shift towards China that you're making right now." And it's known that Israel is sitting at the heart of part of this, at a lot of this espionage. So there's a program called the Talpiot program, which is it's aimed at graduates within Israel, and Unit 8200, and they're creating these startup tech groups, and they're getting everywhere, and they're getting into these CEO positions, but they're military trained. They've come out of a military training and background, and how much of that plays into the extension, the 1,000-year Reich for the, I don't know what you would call it, for Zionists, yeah. But
so the Zionist Reich can't happen because of population demographics. They've lost that battle. Increasingly, this battle that they're fighting is a Pyrrhic victory if they make it. So Israel is essentially non-aligned in the sense that they just play everybody off everybody else. They basically they just allies of convenience. But it's not China and Israel. The Belt and Road is Xi Jinping's initiative. It's not. China never initiated any of that. China's aligned with Saudi Arabia. The nexus is Saudi Arabia, China, and America, with Israel in the lead. Israel dominates that axis of evil. But it's Iran, Russia, China increasingly that's on the other side of the Cold War now, the new Cold War.
So they will. The idea is to buckle the United States, the West, and Israel has. The argument goes that they've managed to integrate themselves into so much infrastructure. Look, like the cloud computing aspect, the Jedi cloud computing for the Pentagon, and how that was, and I think that got stopped potentially. It's so fast moving right now.
No, AWS hosts most of the US government stuff now in its own cloud. So yeah, it's all gone ahead. Yeah, in Amazon.
So, and what's Jeff Bezos? He's Jewish, right? So, these are existential factors playing out right now that we're essentially looking at the battlefield emerge, and SARS-CoV-2 has too much of a fingerprint of a dual-use agent to just be ignoring it as a zoonotic spillover. Okay, so the game theory approach to take right now is to assume the worst, and the two phase component of SARS-CoV-2, which is the acute phase and the potential prion-genesis component, which is
careful the keywords. Careful keywords.
Yeah, I think that one doesn't strike home too much. I don't think they've keyed in on prions too much, and the best dismissive that they've had, which I've sort of come up against, was the science-based, evidence-based medicine or something like that. David Gorski. But their attempt at sort of deflecting any interaction with Michelle Pfeiffer is the fact that the current state of Michelle Pfeiffer, it doesn't involve anything with bovine serum in that could in any way lead to people's understanding of what prion could be. And we're way more sophisticated than that right now with respect to the what we understand with respect to how protein misfolding begins to instantiate itself in the body, in the nervous system. And like I say, I think we discussed this last week, which was that prions were the holy grail of biowarfare development because of this slow burn fuse. The problem was that you couldn't, in order to have them spread, it meant getting them into the food chain if you wanted to have a sort of mass effect on the population. Whereas now it looks like they've got it into an aerosolized form, which is what all biowarfare was about, right? The classic being anthrax was that they had to get it into a sort of so it wouldn't stick together by.
Dispersal is the major problem with bioweapons.
Yeah.
Aerosol dispersion is the biggie. Yeah.
Yeah. And they've defeated that now with prions. If you can engineer a prion genesis site into a protein that's widely expressed and is contagious, now the game theory says, okay, this is full on right now, but we're engaged in this silent warfare, right? And we're the manifestation of it at the public level, where we know civilians are a legitimate target in warfare, right? That was established a long time ago, right? When the gloves come off, how would you say
dogs mean
ethical? Well, no, but I want to say it's like ethical. There's this idea of just and ethical warfare.
The utilitarian thing that the ends justify the means, right?
Yeah, and the
consequences, right?
So, like Dresden being the prime example, or they didn't need to.
Harris, they said, it was all justified by the outcome. It's this consequentialist argument. Yeah, they are consequentialists mostly in the establishment. Certainly the 1%, right? But so I got to tell you something that I'm not an insider, but I had a very unusual career, and I've got close enough to have had a look behind the curtain. And so you've got some things right and you've got some things wrong. I can tell you where your blind spots are because I've heard of what you said. I think one of the things you've got completely wrong, as far as I know, is you said that they're trying to distract us from the long-term view. But basically, you're saying don't look at climate change in the long-term view, because all these things that are happening now, like the pandemic, are just basically, things like climate activism is supposed to take your mind off the pandemic. You got it exactly upside down. But they're trying to take our attention off the long-term view. So the pandemic, in a way, is. As far as I can tell, I would put money on it being an accidental leak of illegal dual-use technology from the Wuhan lab. But if it
in the best of circumstances,
but I think that is I would put my money on that. But if it is a deliberate release, right, then the reason why it would be released, the most credible reason, is they're trying to take people's mind off the future and also training us for what's coming down. So what I've seen over the last decades, I never had a U.S. security clearance, and in some ways it served me better. I got to find out more without a security clearance than I think I would have if I had a security clearance. But what's been going on is that they realized quite long ago that we were seriously fucked. And it came out of the research from the cyberneticists, the guys like Forrester and all of those guys, Norbert Wiener. They did all this modeling for basically the trajectory of the human system and the Earth system, and it came out, and particularly things like the Club of Rome and stuff came out with the limits to growth. So, after Ehrlich and the population bomb and stuff, they started looking at it in earnest and modeling it. And there was a big change round about 1989, about the time when Maggie Thatcher was addressing the UN. There was a big internal change in the system. So that Maggie gave a speech about the future of the planet, environmentalism. To the United Nations.
She busted the unions. Yeah, I remember it very, very clearly. And
no, but that was just a local thing. But the repercussions of that speech in the United Nations was big. What came out of that was the IPCC. So, but it's very interesting what she said in that speech, because I've done a video where I actually juxtaposed Greta Thunberg giving exactly the same speech in 2019, standing in essentially the same podium at the United Nations. She said almost exactly what Maggie Thatcher said, word for fucking word. It's spooky if you edit them in together. The big difference was then, Greta at the end got anti-capitalist, and Maggie Thatcher said, it's basically corporations and business has to solve the climate crisis. But around about that time, there was a big sea change internal. And I think what happened was they ran all these models and they said there's no way out. They came to the conclusion that we all fucked around about that stage. So as the IPCC got launched, it became a vehicle for panic management, and essentially it's just to delay the science, to give everybody, it's basically to underreport the climate situation. So one of the things you've got drastically wrong is the climate situation is very, very bad.
I haven't seen anything like the climate argument. But one, you have to understand this One Health doctrine and the weaponization of that concept. And very few people have even heard of One Health until within the last few months. Okay, and how that ties into the weapons development that's been going on since the Second World War. So you're right that there's a curation component here, and how much is globalist, etc. And in terms of raw data, okay, sea ice, gases in the atmosphere, with respect to public science, there's nothing there that says to me we're outside the realms of anything that we haven't seen on the planet before when we're looking at the measures that we do have, be it tree rings, be it ice cores. There's nothing, even the worst scenarios of runaway climate change with anthropogenic CO2, nothing. Look at 100,000 year time frame, and human beings, we know Homo sapiens have been on the planet 300,000 years.
Well, that's true, but what the concern is growing crops.
So that changes
extinctions
and species extinctions,
insects, birds. I mean, that is raw data. That is not. I don't know what One Health says about. I don't know.
That comes into this idea of it's funny. Let's use EcoHealth as an example that we can look at, but because we know it's shady in the way that it operates. Okay, EcoHealth is going around saying that human beings can't go out and live how they have done naturally and go and eat pangolins, for example. If you live where pangolins are, right? Because eating bushmeat is bad for you. Whereas at the same time, Palmolive is funding EcoHealth Alliance, and they don't care about the environment in this case. It's just covers and fronts to manage perception, as it were, everyone should know who Palmolive is and what it is that they do and how they got started. And why are we listening to these people with respect to pandemics, okay, when we can see that they're not only wrong, they're part of the problem which has caused the if we go down a accidental leak hypothesis, which is the best case scenario for the game theory analysis, okay, that it was accidental. They went out into the jungles of Southeast, well, it's not forests, I guess, of Southeast Asia. They sampled the bats. They brought them back to the lab, and they did the gain of function on these viruses which they're isolating in the wild. We know that they're talking about Nipah virus all the time, and you've got Peter Daszak on record saying, well, we get these outbreaks of Nipah, but it gets absorbed by the background illness that you see that's just endemic in the country. It doesn't seem to sort of break out, but we know that they're doing gain of function on Nipah, right?
But we get off topic. So
it's gonna come round. It's gonna come round to the climate aspect. So these people are the ones saying they're trying to curate the climate with respect to this idea of species, diversity of species, the farmlands, etc. Look, coastlines change on a long enough time period that, okay, if crops change, there's a reason China's buying up huge swathes of Africa, right? They're investing heavily in Africa because, you know what, their culture goes back thousands and thousands of years, and they keep bloody good records, right? And they've probably got an understanding of the cyclical nature of what does come and go, and I would argue that's probably more nature based. Whether pick your if be it volcanoes or some sort of solar event or whatever you want to sort of put your finger on. I don't the idea that it's humans itself that's causing that, that we're the driving mechanism of that, I think it's
Hey, Kevin, so what I'll do after this Zoom talk, I'll link you a video of this professor named Sid Smith. He has all the data and he breaks it down, like the primary productivity of the planet and how much humans are actually consuming, how much wildlife is actually left on the planet. I'll link you that video in the Discord after the talk, and you can watch. It's like an hour long.
I've seen it. I know the data, but we know that there are extinction level events all the time. You can go back 12,000 years, and we lost all the megafauna across the North American continent. We don't know why. The idea that human beings hunted down all that megafauna with Clovis spear tips is a nonsense. That's the type of narrative that gets pushed by woke.
Well, it's civilized humans with advanced technological ability. We're literally like eating the planet with our technology and our numbers. That's what it boils down to.
So listen to Hugh when he says that once the urbanization takes place and the material needs start happening, there's a tendency towards civilizational or population collapse. Now, I would put forward the premise: what are we looking at right now as these people who have the power? And like I said, we only know the public face of them. Okay, if they think they've got the technology to automate everything, where they don't need the factories and they only need so many people around to take care of their yachts and to make sure that there's a feel of the leisure existence, right? The countryside has some life in it, right? I'm pretty sure that they don't want to get down. If the 500 million number is a real number, I don't know, but the Georgia guides don't.
No, I think it's real. I think it's real, at least in some sectors. Yeah, so it's not monolithic, right? So the thing that's the One Health thing is just one of many things that are very similar. You're missing a large piece in the financial industry.
It's financial. It's all of these things, but I'm trying to address this idea of environmental collapse.
It's real. It's driving the elite. It's the bit you're missing. So they figured out long ago that collapse is unavoidable. I can't pinpoint exactly when. I've looked into it, but it's difficult because it's not just one group. I mean, if you take something like the Pentagon, there are lots of factions and competing ideas, but the One Health is just one part of something like the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab and the Great Reset. They're all in the one world order. There are very many strands that kind of converge on this.
Yeah.
It's not just one organization.
No.
They're very, very similar.
So you have to.
But I mean, it's more than one health. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, don't misunderstand me of the One Health being the one key to, or the one ring to rule them all. But you have to understand how the information has been weaponized in this day and age. Okay, so environmentalism is.
No, I do. But the point you're missing here is is you
have to bring the evidence for what's a natural cycle versus what's how much is really man-made. So we can look at carbon offsetting, right? And the fact that the United States the West has crippled their economies by going for this carbon neutral type of economy, not using fossil fuels. But what all that does is empower countries like China and India to undercut, and they are polluting. And I'll tell you again that this whole idea of the atmosphere being irreversibly polluted, it took days for the lockdown in China for things to clear up, right? The smogs to disappear when they locked down their country. And Wuhan was one of the worst cities for where you would see people, you couldn't see 300 yards because of industrial smog. And it's so bad. When I was in Korea, there was just a yellow tinge all the time in the sky, whereas if you go a few hundred miles to the east, Japan just has these deep blue azure skies. The difference is striking. Within this last year, we've seen that disappears overnight, right? The stopping of high altitude commercial flights had a measurable impact on the environment within days to weeks. None of those projections that I've seen have crawled their way to something that I would say is anything more than correlation. Okay.
So would you agree, Kevin?
Sophie, let me speak here.
Would you agree that deindustrialization would be on the agenda? So if you notice such a thing, would you be a proponent that human beings, if they don't want to be blamed for climate change and global warming, should totally deindustrialize totally?
No. Do I think we should shoot ourselves in the foot while our enemies are arming themselves to the teeth and have all their heavy industry? No, I don't. that's a naive way of looking at the world. And big pieces are being made on the chessboard right now. Okay, and I just look at them as mob type factions. And they will use their populations as they see fit. And look, when the Allies and the Axis nations went to war, there were groups behind those countries that we can look back in retrospect and say, oh, they were playing both sides, right? And the same heuristic is at play right now. Okay, so show me climate models that really take into account the proper nature of the sun and the Earth's interaction with the sun, that take into account, like we're going into a minimum right now, a potential more than minimum that's on. And
no, but so you're preaching to the choir on all this. I mean, we're in violent agreement, but I'm trying to get through to you, and I don't think you're listening. So in terms of the climate, there's not. Yeah, the link is okay. So you understand the climate is changing. You understand that?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay, but now the question is it anthropogenic?
And I will vehemently argue against that point until you've got to use hard science at this point, not subverted science. Look, I'll give you article 1, East Anglia University and the hockey stick graphs. Right, and how they were caught cooking their code.
I grant you all that. Yeah. But here's the thing: so does it really matter if it's anthropogenic or not? What's the issue?
Well, it depends on the defensive posture that you take, right? So if it's part of a natural cycle, okay, the idea that we should be the nihilistic view that's been injected into our youth, right? That they're frightened about the idea of having children, and on multiple levels. One, because we put them into massive debt. Two, because we've just subverted what the core basis of what it means to the building block of culture and society, which is the family. And you instantiate an existential fear in our youngest that's you playing directly into the hands of those that want you not to go into the next generation, right? So let's
agreed. But what's that? Why it doesn't explain why it matters whether it's anthropogenic or not. I mean, if it's natural, you would still be nihilistic at this point. Why does what's the big deal about it being anthropogenic or natural? It's basically if it's naturally tending towards collapse, and we're in a climate crisis naturally, who gives a fuck? See, the way I think it is at the moment is it's anthropogenic. It's us. It's you. You're right that it's only correlation. They can't really prove a causation, but the correlation is strong. You're never going to get proof of causality. But the CO2, the greenhouse gases, their concentrations are going up in coordination with them. Like the models are bullshit. Okay, I'll grant you, but the fact is that the greenhouse gas concentrations are going up with the temperature, and that's solid. So the correlation is solid. The thing is that there are a number of points on this. Is the correlations are very, very strong. I mean, forget McCαιrn and the hockey stick graph. They are very, very strong, and they're happening too rapidly. So if you look at the stuff that you made a statement that's quite wrong. Basically, the solar in one of your previous videos, you said something about basically the solar forcing is not included. Yeah, it's included. The IPCC.
No, it's not. It's not, because they're just taking irradiance.
It's in the IPCC report.
Yeah,
it's in the IPCC report. They account
right,
for about.
But they're not. They don't understand the sun. It's a non-argument. Yes, I know. They take.
Can I fucking finish? Okay. It's in the IPCC report. It accounts for about, I'm not sure the percentage, but something from memory, something like 25%. But it is in there, right? So
it's a drastic simplification of what the sun is doing and the Earth's interaction with the sun. Okay.
Yes.
We know that UV output from the sun is only just one metric. Okay, there's this whole concept that the Earth itself is floating in a gravity well, not connected to the sun, and it's some higher dimensional construct that's keeping it in place.
Whereas you're all right on this. The bit that you've got wrong there is it doesn't account for the temperature, right? So the correlation between the solar activity and the basically Milankovitch cycles and all of that kind of stuff is they don't account for the heating. If you want to account for the heating, it's becoming increasingly obvious.
So how are you measuring the heating?
From satellites, basically satellite imagery, and
so that I can go through and I can find hole after hole in every bit of measurement and how they're doing those measurements and how it's being used to weaponize the information with respect to what you understand to be climate change. Okay, the heating.
There is hole after hole, but that doesn't negate it. You see, the problem is here that it's a very, very complex system. And you can cherry pick till the cows come home. It's basically there's too much information in some ways, and in some ways there's too little. So there's nothing definitive, and there won't be. The problem with that is that even climate scientists, then looking at the data, they get to a psychological barrier because it's too much data for one human to assimilate. There's something like 2,000 papers produced sometimes every week on climate. There's far too much data. So what it means is that
skewed data
to cherry pick the data, and so you're never going to get an outcome. What happens is the more you look at it, it starts to look worse and worse from more and more angles. And eventually, how much you can actually absorb of the information becomes psychological. Your personal psychology is how much of this, it's very, very bad picture. And so people get to a stopping point. That's what climate scientists are facing, basically a denial of collapse. So when you look at this, the data is saying collapse. Now that's it's just an aggregate that's hard to get to without a lot of study. How much people will
again? So this
is based on human psychology.
So again, I would look at it like this way. So we've got a great example in SARS-CoV-2. Papers are being churned out in the hundreds per day with SARS-CoV-2. Why? Because right now it's incentivized with money, right? So the more that and this is the problem with science, that there's a loss of the of objectivity that comes with once you start incentivizing a research direction. Climate change became the green. Look, they want the green ideal because it's a cudgel to control humanity. Okay, that's why I point to the One Health doctrine. Okay, so that's how they'll bundle you into the cities. That's how they'll get you under the tracing, etc. And that's how they'll bring in the automation. And then they'll say, the jobs aren't there because we're automating, etc. So we don't need these large populations. They don't mind having a controlled burn, right? But
I agree with you on all this. It's you see the bit that's.
And I disagree with you about the environmental collapse. I'm not. It's a natural cycle, and the finish to that argument is, well, we can see that there's an 11 to 12,000 year cycle. We've been here for hundreds of thousands of years, okay? And the idea that we should just stop and say fuck it or delve into reckless hedonism is it's short-sighted. We've been given the evolutionary tools to move forward through this, and it comes from the more esoteric or religious type doctrines that shrink down. Don't get too big that you're pushing the edges of what your ecosystem can sustain, right? So
but we're all in violent agreement on these points.
Yeah, so it's just I'm not as convinced that the natural. I don't think it's a man-made cycle, right? It's natural. Then
but why would it matter? Why would it matter if so? Okay, if
so
we
need people to get through.
It is natural. Where does it end up? I mean, where is the Earth sensitivity? I mean, you agree that the Earth is heating, right? That's not a matter.
Well, I'm very skeptical of the heating data being pushed out when it's being used to look in our lifetime. It's gone from we were heading towards an ice age to we've got runaway heating to now we're going into another minimum, etc. And what I see is incentivized professors and organizations like EcoHealth. EcoHealth is a good one to focus on because we can see how corrupt that is and how it feeds from each side.
Well, that's the thing with state science and propaganda is you can take the fact that the Earth is heating, you can do whatever narrative you want with it. But I'm convinced that the Earth is heating. But you can take the Earth is heating, see the data, say, oh, we're fucked. But no, there's hope because we got green technology. You see, you can take a fact and lie with it. You see.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Thing on the right, you see, I've got a friend who's like a 1%er, but he's openly a fascist, right? He's like really far right.
Roman salute to that gentleman.
He says, hang on a minute. He says that this common narrative on the right that saying, well, no, all this thing about environmentalism and climate change, it's just the Green New Deal. It's basically, he keeps on saying there's $2 trillion that's been invested. It's a big scam to get money. He's right. It is. The disconnect that the right wing can't get is that's true, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a climate catastrophe.
Yes, exactly.
But again, what's your climate catastrophe? If you're saying that it's anthropogenic, that changes the very fundamentals of how you approach this problem and how you game theory.
No, not quite, because it's too far gone. So basically, what the important thing about the climate is, is you made another statement which I fundamentally disagree with in one of your previous things, and that's that the climate system is resilient. It's not. It's exquisitely fragile. What you're looking at
now you've got millions of years of biology and what we know as catastrophic events in the fossil record that we can look at.
Yeah.
Life finds
that's what
a way.
I mean. It's unstable. That's what I'm saying. It's unstable. It's not robust.
But life finds a way.
Catastrophic gyration.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's like worrying about thunderstorms and rain.
No, not quite, because we've got through a number of bottlenecks, right? The Younger Dryas and stuff about 12,500 years ago, that was one of the last ones. Now, about 100,000 humans, just managed to squeak through in Europe. It was a very each one of those things. I mean, we've been around for 200,000 years, or maybe 300,000. Yeah. But I mean, as fucking Australopithecus or something, 4.3 million years. But the thing is that those were really, really lucky scrapes. So the thing you're missing now about anthropogenic climate change is that we're doing the changes faster than those. So there are catastrophic and extreme events, but there's
than Younger Dryas, really. Like the
Younger Dryas was an extreme event, but not many people's crept through, right?
Right, but people still crept through. This is the point. So we have there's going to be a genetic memory, an epigenetic memory that's passed through. Okay, that we know we can induce it in rats. Okay, that we know that there are these.
Okay, so we squeaked through because we had an intact habitat. So there was still, particularly like the megafauna and stuff was taken out. I agree that probably not by humans, but the not entirely, but we must have contributed a bit, particularly with scorched earth and stuff like that, which I think hunter-gatherers were doing. But the thing is that we had megafauna, we had an intact habitat, human habitat. What we've done now with the particularly with the lack of diversity is that we can't squeak through now because there's not enough of our habitat left after civilization collapses. So the problem is that it's coming on too fast. It's kind of like you could, if you look in the climate record, you can see, people say, well, we've had these CO2 concentrations. We haven't never in human history and in the Holocene, in the last 200,000 years, we've never had these temperatures. But we've had the CO2 concentrations. They don't mix completely. They're not perfect correlation. But the science is reasonably well understood on that score. But the thing is that when we went into those things previously as hunter-gatherers, they were slower. This is too abrupt, and it's taking down the food web so that there's nothing for survivors to support. You see, I went through a long period.
So you just got to go back to Younger Dryas, right? You can look at the pulse water 1AB, 1AC, or 1A, 1AB, okay, and that's days, right? And you can see the scars of it across North America, where the water, it's completely the scablands, all that type of stuff. Okay, that's there. We can see, and we can see that there's a causal element towards very, very drastic change in the environment at a time when the population density was, I would argue, way, way lower. Okay, and like I say, I don't know how, if the sea levels were down 400 feet back then, how much got submerged. So we're not seeing how much human civilization there was. I don't know. I'm the very premise that we would take anthropogenic climate change and do anything other than what's been instructed up from us from the very beginning, which is make life and keep making it. And with that life, there's a degree of conservatism that you need to maintain to make sure that the social weaknesses that we're seeing right now crack and undermine the systems that we have, right? So that this is what we've got in the universities, that the environmental scientists are overrun with ideologues. Okay, that's it's been a very deliberate trajectory when you look at it.
Sorry to interrupt, Ken, but that's exactly what Hugh was pointing at. Our attitude doesn't depend whether it's anthropogenic or is it natural. We want to be in a situation of facts, and where we are now, whether it's anthropogenic or not, doesn't matter a bit, because we are not in the same situation as hunter-gatherers, as you were saying, that had soil that was able to sustain wildlife, food that you were able to pick. We have in Europe, America, and a lot of the world, completely devoted land to intensive agriculture. If there's a collapse of civilization, and the urbanized people run to the country to be able to find any food. In previous catastrophes, well, a lot died. Some managed in little gangs to get around. They found their fruit. They found some animals to kill somewhere. But now when we're faced, whether it's anthropogenic or not, we're faced with this situation. That's where we are.
So the answer to that is get as many. You need skin in the game. You got to have skin in the game to get through, and you want to make sure that your genes are the ones that do get through. And the problem with the anthropogenic side of the argument is that they've so subverted the it's a Western problem. Okay, it's not a problem in Africa. Okay, look, they're coming en masse from sub-Saharan Africa and swamping the southern borders of Europe, such that the genetic diversity of Europe is at peril. Okay, we don't lack.
Why are they coming? They're coming because of the climate crisis in Africa.
They're coming because of the bloody benefits that they get.
I know. But listen, look at what's going on in Kenya, where the land is bought by the Chinese. Look at the drying of Ethiopia, the drying of Sudan, the wars. It's much more complex than just coming to.
Yeah, and I'm not buying Bob Geldof's idea of this. This idea that Ethiopia is always in this famine. We engaged in a essentially infantilizing them, bringing them corn and so that they exceeded the carrying capacity of their lands. Right. These are not hard things to pick apart when you step outside of the green narrative, and you've reached the point in this dialogue. The clips come off, the safeties come off the grenade. Okay, it's in the air right now, and you've got to run for cover. And the game theory approach says that SARS-CoV-2, even if it was an accident, even right, and let's give them that it was an accident. The best of intentions, that they were trying to prevent a pandemic. Okay, instantiated this next pandemic, but this pandemic somehow has the holy grail embedded in it, which is this slow burn prion process going on that then can convince people, holy shit, now we need even more advanced medicines to combat this prion thing, because those sneaky Chinese, etc., they did it, etc. Everyone's backing off this like crazy because everyone's involved in its creation. No one's got clean hands right now. What I would put my trust in right now is we need a core group that, okay, we vaccinate half and we see if that's a better strategy, and the other half we have to say, look, you can't get it because we don't know what it is that we're dealing with right now. Right, and that's and that approach is it's the sensible one, as well as going with a war footing with respect to your economies. The shutdown was a disaster, in my opinion. Everything that's being done right now just almost looks like deliberate self-sabotage, from my perspective.
Yeah, agree. I think that there should be a variety of responses. is the idea that we have one unified response is a big mistake. We shouldn't be putting all our eggs in one basket. So I think that's a very dangerous thing about all this suppression and censorship and stuff. Is like you say, they should be vaccinating certain populations. They should be putting people in quarantine bubbles and having, green zones and, corridors and stuff where people can circulate. But you want a variety of approaches, because this is really uncertain. People don't really know how this is going to evolve. So the worst thing you can do is centralize everything in some dictator's hands, and, in like the United Nations and WHO. So this is the whole thing behind my project and the ARG, is that our biggest threat of all is the centralized authoritarian response.
And this I agree on 100%.
Get rid of the biggest threat if we're going into a crisis and collapse, and I'm telling you we are. I'm living it. I'm a sailor at sea, and we're in trouble in terms of the weather. It's frightening at sea. I mean, it's all academic for people. I get a little bit emotional about the climate, because I'm a liveaboard sailor, and in the sailing community, we're seeing the weather change, and it's fucking alarming. I mean, it's happening a lot faster than people realize, and it's not academic for us sailors. It's not some bullshit that you read about solar forcing. I risk my life at least twice a year in these storms, and the weather's it's taken a turn it's a subject that's continually is discussed over beers about the liveaboard community, and people are scared. It's people who live indoors, I mean, outside of nature. You're living about as close as nature as you can get as a liveaboard sailor, and the weather's changing, and the reasons are known. Everybody knows it's and the reason why it's changing are known, but we have clearly destabilized. I mean, I have no doubt it's anthropogenic, but we've clearly destabilized the climate system. So it's not a question of these smooth graphs and that. There's abrupt climate change, and
it's a chaos system. This is what I try to hammer home with. People need to understand the complex network complexity, right? Which is it's a key principle in neuroscience, that you can be looking at extended networks, and when you're trying to sort of pin down causality. And look, I spent 20 plus years of my life just to capture this one image of the brain pushing out something approximating causal, but it was a very abnormal behavior. It was taking this system, highly complex system, and artificially pushing it to one end. Okay, but I got that snapshot of that causality, but the ability to sort of, there was a jitter, even though we knew that there was this artificial signal in the noise that would be very difficult to pin down precisely. And there would be bits that would be missed, and there were so many factors that are laid on top of that it's virtually an impenetrable system to fully. It's the same with the ecology argument. Okay, what we do know is that when the change happens, just one small part of the network needs to initiate the change, and boom, it then cascades globally through a system. Okay.
Yeah, but so that's very well understood. So that tipping point. So if you take the network, the neural network, it's really a scale-free network. It has Pareto distribution. It's basically, you know what that is, right? Basically, it's 80% of the, or 20% of the nodes will have 80% of the connections. It's a very common thing. It's from the reason for normal distribution and why it's so prevalent in natural systems. The ecosystem is like that too. The food webs are those scale-free networks. Now, they know very well, and this is one of my areas of expertise that I've done a lot of modeling in this, and there's a tipping point at, strangely, 50%. So if you have 20% of the nodes controlling 80% of the effects of the network or something like that, if you you would only have to take out those 20% of nodes, and then because it's scale free, you can take out 20% of the 20% if you can identify them. There's you have data overload quickly in something complex as a neural net or an ecology. But in essence, in principle, it's mathematically provable that you can take 20% of the 20% of the 20%, and as long as you're getting the right preferential nodes, you could selectively take them out and take out very few the nodes. This is very important in terms of revolution and activism and stuff. I'm trying to get people to rebel in terms of social networks. But hang on. So the thing is, if you just scattergun, if you just shot the nodes at random, then without being selective, then the system is quite robust. It tips at 50%. So that in terms of things like ecology, one of the big mistakes that the public is making, and is reinforced by these environmental sites like Mongo Bay and The Guardian and stuff, is they show you these species going extinct as a list. And everybody thinks, oh, you go down the list and then you eventually get to humans. It's not. That list is talking about a scale-free network, and each one of those species is a node. So there's a very good paper saying that basically that you get total extinction because of co-extinction of the nodes. And where it tips is 50%. We're at 50% in so many of these ecosystems. If you take the ecosystem or the ecosystems, we're at the tipping point. In fact, I think that it's more than reasonable to say we passed it in 2020. 2020 was a crucial year. And it's because we've been taking out the nodes bang, bang, bang at random. We got to 50% in so many areas like the Amazon, in terms of the marine life, in terms of the ecology in Africa and Asia, the land use. In so many ways, we took out these scale-free networks and we tipped them over. If we didn't tip them over in 2020, it's just a matter of time in 2021, 2022. But I think we're in a feedback scenario. So the thing that people don't understand very well, or they don't understand intuitively, is the same thing with the virus. They don't understand exponential growth, and the exponential growth comes from often a feedback loop. So they don't understand feedback and they don't understand exponential growth. So you see a lot of people with the virus. You saw this where they said. And a lot of people in Greece say, look, they don't believe it. A lot of people here in Greece do not believe that this virus exists. It's very common. And the reason is they say, well, I don't know anybody that's got it. Do you? And you say, well, no, you won't, because we're at the thin tail of the thing. But when it grows exponentially, it's suddenly, woof, it's going to get you. And that's exactly the same thing with the climate, is people are thinking linearly. And part of the misreporting of the IPCC is they're doing a deliberate snow job to actually say that it's more linear than it actually is. It's not entirely malicious what they're doing. Their mandate is just to slow change down in terms of environmental action, but and to preserve the economy. So it's not entirely malicious in that way, but it is dangerous because they're telling people that it's these smooth graphs, and they're not. They're basically about to break symmetry. And there's going to be abrupt changes. So what we're seeing as liveaboard sailors afloat is we've seen the abrupt change in the weather already. It's primarily due to the jet stream, and the weather is getting sticky. I'll give you an example of, say, the Meltemi here in Greece. The Meltemi is a very strong wind, and it's been feared from ancient times. From ancient Greek sailors, from Jason, and that ran in fear of the Meltemi in the Aegean. And if you look at the pilot guides, there's Ron Heichel's Greek Waters pilot, which is everybody uses around here. He's got about a chapter of climate change. And he started doing the pilot guide since 1970. And he's visibly seeing how these old timers have seen the weather change. Now, in the pilot guide, it says the Meltemi, blows, 3 times a year or so for about 3 days, sometimes 5, and that's traditionally how it was described. it blows all the fucking time now. It's I mean, palm sweaty scary. That basically last season it blew all fucking summer. It genuinely, this alarm is not being communicated to the public. It's just unbelievable. So the reason why the Meltemi blew also, I mean, without fucking relentlessly, month after month after month, is basically the reason why it blew like that is because the jet stream is breaking down. And the jet stream is breaking down because there's not enough temperature differential between the tropics and the Arctic.
Well, it doesn't break down. It becomes more.
It wavy. No, it's breaking down.
It's wavy. It's a more chaotic imprint onto the.
Yes,
but it's not that it's not there. And the idea
it will break. No, it's gonna not be there. So it's getting wavy, but it has broken. In fact, it actually went further south than the equator, which a lot of climate scientists say is not possible. Beckwith, there's a climate scientist called Beckwith, and he's got a YouTube channel. But he said that in this one instance, that the jet stream broke up enough to go past the equator, and then there was uproar because there's other climate scientists said it's not possible, and now the general agreement is he was right. That it did. So it has, I mean, they're very, very scary images of the jet stream breaking up. But the extreme weather we're getting in America now is one of it going wavy.
So what's the causal aspect here? So there's a lot more to do with electromagnetic potential than there is to do with thermal input. Okay, and we are not even an inch towards understanding the electromagnetic interactions of all the layers of the atmosphere, its interaction with local space, its interaction with the sun, right? We've only just sent a probe, I think it's called Walker probe, actually, into the towards the sun, where we're beginning to get an idea of the structure of the real structure of the plasma ropes that come off the sun and how they interact with the Earth. Okay, and we know, we can look and we can see, like, so the northern lights, we know that there are things called Birkeland currents that connect the sun and the Earth, and we're in this global circuit. Okay, we don't understand that circuit enough to be trying to push our idea of greenhouse gases onto this very, very complex plasma electrodynamic system. Okay, and like I say, we've only understood in the last few years that lightning literally comes from space. It's not something that's.
But I agree with you on all this. The electromagnetic aspects of space have been, woefully underreported or under-researched, and basically underappreciated is the huge electromagnetic effects going on in space and the upper atmosphere. I agree. It's I won't go into it, but there's interesting things that are basically in the ionosphere. There is a waveguide where there's a lot of electromagnetic activity being circulated around the world, and that was only recently discovered. It's a waveguide pretty much like your microwave oven. And so, but I absolutely agree with you 1,000%. But here's the thing that I'm still feeling you're not getting is it doesn't matter if the fact is that it's whether it's natural or not.
It's changing. We get it. Everyone gets that it's changing.
It doesn't matter whether it's anthropogenic or not.
I agree. The problem that we're dealing with right now is those that are convinced it's you living on your boat, Hugh, because you're putting out marine oil into the harbor, right? I'm not convinced.
My carbon credentials are fucking immaculate. I use about, I mean, literally, I use about a kilogram of natural gas every 2 months. I live, yeah, basically I live off solar. The water I do is made with a water maker. Is basically when people start talking about wind turbines and solar, is like they can fuck right off, because I live on it, and I'm telling you, there's no such thing as energy transition. Solar, you're talking to a guy who lives off solar panels, for so much so that my drinking water comes from a desalinator from solar panels. I had a wind turbine, I took it off my boat and chucked it away because it's fucking useless. I'm telling you that basically wind turbines and solar panels, stop that shit. It's bullshit. It's horseshit. Nobody is going to be living off solar panels.
But I would say this: diversify your energy supplies. Right? There's not that's a sensible argument to have. Don't be held to ransom by Saudi oil families. Okay. I'm for fracking. I'm for getting energy anywhere and everywhere we can. Okay, and if they can, and short of making fusion devices, if there's some way to leverage your garden soil to get out that kilogram of natural gas, so I can sell it to you, I'm all for that. Right?
Here's the problem. Here's the problem: is that if we've destabilized the Earth system and the climate, it's a population bottleneck that, like you say, you probably want to have kids and try to make sure that your genes squeak through. Here's the problem. I think I'm convinced that the greenhouse gas concentrations are, imply that it's anthropogenic. So I'm sold on the idea it's anthropogenic. If you carry on putting CO2 up in the atmosphere, which is what you're doing if you burn fossil fuels, is that you drastically decrease the number of people that can make it through that population bottleneck. So if you want your kids to survive the bottleneck, you want to stop that carbon, and you want to stop burning fossil fuels. You don't want us to do it with solar panels and all this fucking fiction, but we need to rapidly. Our only hope is to step on the brakes of industrialization. So it's basically what COVID has shown is a number of proving things that were theoretically doubtful. One of them is the global dimming and the aerosol masking effect. It's basically getting some data on that now. But the other thing is that 2008 and now this pandemic has showed that there's a one-to-one correlation between greenhouse gas emissions and the GDP. There was about a 7% decrease in the GDP, in global GDP in 2008 after the financial crisis, and there was a corresponding 8%. Basically, it's a one-for-one percentage correlation between industrial slowdown and greenhouse gas emissions. So what that implies is we have to take greenhouse gas emissions to zero. I mean, we're talking emissions to zero. There's no such thing as net emissions. That's a complete con game. But we have to get to zero emissions. We need zero industrial output, and that's
I'm not buying that though, because there is a carbon cycle. We're like I say, we live in very look, the fact you're on a boat that's probably fiberglass and all sorts of man-made materials is testament to you being able to survive in environments that were unthinkable even a few generations ago. Okay, we're at levels of population right now. Yes, we could see a very big dieback, way bigger than people are expecting. That's part of the game theory that you have to take on board right now, and the pressures can come from multiple directions. So say, for example, just step back from something that's kind of nebulous, because we can't, it's difficult to grasp the causal element in it, which is, so it can go back and forth all the time, this climate debate. I've been watching it my whole life. I was petrified as a child that we were going to be under a mile of ice. Okay, but what was very clear was that programming was ongoing at that time that frightened children. And I would say we can learn a lot from this past year. Okay, the impacts on the atmosphere are not as irreversible as the doomsayers make out with respect to the particulate matter. It all cleared and went away within weeks of China basically shutting down, and China's back up and building more power stations. They don't care, and they will push through, and they're not going to deindustrialize. Okay, and if they manage to maintain a vestige of industry and we don't, we've gone back to agrarian lifestyles, and you're just going to have Mongol hordes coming across the Eurasian plate again to come and pillage. And I want my belt-fed machine gun, and I want a extended family all with belt-fed machine guns to keep them at bay. That's how I think, because it's nature.
You're right. But you're missing a few pieces. One of the pieces you're missing is that you're not unique in this assessment. If you ask about you got to ask yourself, who the power brokers? What do they think? Have they figured this out, or is it just you? And I'm telling you now that I know for a fact, as someone who's seen behind the curtain, that they figured this out long before anybody else. There's an ongoing frustration with climate activists that says, why, Extinction Rebellion, is they doing all this activism, trying to wake up politicians, as why is there so much lethargy? Why is there so much inertia? Why are these politicians being so suicidal and stuff? And I'll tell you the answer is the answer that they're not getting is these guys figured out long ago, decades ago, that we're fucked. So they trapped, and they're doing panic management. They just moving slow enough to basically accede to the public, the published consequences of how close we are to collapse. But short of actually doing panic management, they're going to do as little as possible, because they've got, I don't know this for a fact, because I've never seen a document in that. I can only infer from little scraps that I've seen. And so I don't know what it's called or something, but as far as I can tell, I just call it the Millerway's Doctrine. I wrote a book about it, and I just named it that because I haven't got any insight into what it really is. But from what I can piece together is they have a doctrine that basically says we're trapped, we're fucked, and we're going to go out on kind of a high. Basically, we're going to try and manage it all the way, and then inside that there are various factions on how to cope with it. But the dialogue inside places like the Pentagon is fucking nuts. I mean, I'm telling you, psychotic nuts. And so the kind of factions that you're talking about there inside places like the Pentagon is the guys who think like you do, who think like, well, it's almost like Dr. Strangelove and Kubrick's Dr. Strange. It's almost like the War Room scene in there. It's cunningly accurate. Is that some of those guys think we're going to survive because we got a mine shaft gap and we're going to go. So there's the survivalist kind of group. There's one scary group that's where Star Wars and all this shit came from, and that's basically. I mean, these guys are batshit crazy, but they think that we're all an alien experiment, and you see these releases from there was the F-17s in San Diego and stuff. They keep on releasing all this UFO stuff. They used to release UFO stuff like Area 51 and stuff as a cover for secret projects and skunk work projects, but from what I can tell, these latest ones have come out of these guys that genuinely preparing for an alien invasion. Now, even within that faction, I've heard that the guys that are saying that we're a kind of alien experiment, and I riffed off that in my videos. Actually, I put in things that are basically trolling the guys. If anyone of those guys said. I asked my contact guy, ex-Alphabet Soup guy, and I said, well, where would these guys come from? He says, from the Pleiades. And so I put in a lot of references and stuff into my alternate reality game based on plays. But that faction says we're not in trouble because we're an alien experiment. They will intervene if we fuck it up too badly. So they think we can go and do, release as much CO2 and go, they think that there's enough monitoring going on by extraterrestrials that, if Trump hit the big red button or something, they would stay his hand.
Hugh,
so
what you're saying,
they're almost mystical, yeah.
Oh, what you're saying reminds me of a movie I saw. Did you ever see that remake of The Day the World Stood Still? It's like, yeah, the aliens will come, see the mess we made of the planet, release nanomachines, and fucking kill us all.
Yeah, well, there's that group too. Actually, Hawkins thought that. Hawkins thought, basically said, like, yeah, the aliens, you don't want to actually make contact with aliens because, if they're anything like us, they're going to use us.
Well, in the remake of the movie, the alien came to try and convince humanity to stop destroying the planet, and when he got accosted by the security leaders of the United States, that gave him a bad impression. So he activated the nanomachines, and they started killing everybody.
Yeah. But anyway, I just paint this picture to tell you that we're in serious trouble because these guys are barking mad. The guys in the wheelhouse of this Titanic are fucking barking mad. But I'm telling you that the most of them, the consensus of the guys that are actually, pulling all the strings, the guys behind the curtain, I'll tell you for a fact, they're tracking to a 7-degree by the end of the century. No one really knows Earth sensitivity, so they don't know where it stops. There are a few scenarios that we might be tracking for, and those are like Venus-Earth scenarios where the Earth gets sterilized like Venus because of runaway heating. But in general, the Department of Transport, for a fact, is estimating 7 degrees by the end of the century. 7 degrees we don't scrape through. I don't think anybody credibly thinks there are humans left.
I'm not buying those projections right now because look, it's like me doing.
I'm not trying to convince you of those projections. I'm just trying to convince you that of the mindset of the guys that are actually behind the curtain. So what I'm trying to say is those guys have collapse built in. So if you any conspiracy theory in that, you have to say that these guys are in the know. They know a hell of a lot more than us, and they have a lot better systems for aggregating data. So collecting and aggregating is
but you've still got to interpret
a holistic view, and I'm telling you the fact that they're tracking towards collapse.
Yeah, so I can look at, let's say I shoot off from orbit and I look down on life on this planet, and I would say, well, everything sort of it reaches a carrying capacity, then it levels out. These are sort of basic principles that we see with biology, whether it's sort of bacteria or lions on the savannah. Could you make the argument that humans have exceeded some sort of carrying capacity? Yes, if we were reliant on flint tools and all that type of stuff. Is the influence of mutually assured destruction type thinking prevalent in institutes like the Pentagon and the defense? Yes, of course. That's part of their game theory, and that's why I think game theory paradigms have run their course. It's just always into a dead end loop all the time, especially when you don't have the full or it's not even that you have the full data, it's that you skew your analysis in a particular way, right? So we're constantly having to adjust. That's the power of the scientific method that we'll get through. And I would put forward the premise that yes, it's changing. I think the just this, like I say, Milankovitch cycles, global solar minimum, etc. And I've seen people freaking out about this Maunder minimum, right? And where do I hear that from? Well, you hear it from places like America, where the countries are still young and juvenile, you don't hear the Aborigines worrying about solar minimums, right? If you are part of the, I forget what the Finnish reindeer herders, I forgot what I was going to use them as an example, but
the Sami.
Yes, that's them. If you've got a culture that's embedded and survived generations and generations, these type of existential worries are not there, right? I could make a tilt towards saying that, or let me ask you a question, Hugh. Why are you on a boat?
It's my prepping strategy.
Right, your prepping strategy, but what if your prepping strategy was wrong based on a faulty interpretation of the data? And what you've done is you've put yourself into an existential, you've moved across the edge of the existential risk factors because you've shrunk your world by thinking that the boat was the best strategy, right? And
no, it's not a bunker strategy. So I encourage people not to.
No, I didn't say bunker. I said best. Not bunker, best.
No, but I mean, you're saying that I'm doing. No, I'm not on a boat because it's a bunker mentality. I strenuously tell people, don't prep with a bunker mentality. I'm not doing it as a bunker mentality. I'm not on a boat because that's the way I want to live. It's basically because it's my preferred way of dying.
So could I suggest that it was perhaps there was a fear of rising sea level? And
no. So the rising sea level stuff is bullshit.
Right.
Yeah,
so
worry about
I'm not worried about rising
sea level, but it's not an issue. It's a nonsense. Yeah.
But did you take into account wobbly jet streams when you
Yeah,
when you took
I
the boat?
calculated a little bit you see what I figured. The reason why I'm on a boat is because I arrived in Los Angeles in 1994, just after the Rodney King riots, and basically everybody was seriously rattled, and I just missed the Rodney King riot by about a week, but everybody told me what this prepping strategy was for a little kind of a Mad Maxy scene. And I had some friends who had a boat, and I sailed with them in Los Angeles. They sailed out of Los Angeles Harbor, and I asked them what they had to do. They had to go across town from Santa Monica through all these rioters, and they were seriously worried for their life. And they live in Long Beach, and so they had all these guys screaming past their house, basically burning shit and breaking them. So they were really worried for them, and they thought, what the fuck do we do? So they said, well, let's get down to our boat and we'll just head out to sea. So that's what they did. They got in their boat, they headed out, and they realized about 500 meters off the coast of Los Angeles, they well, no one can get us here. What the fuck do we do? So they just basically lay a hull and thought, well, now we're just watching it like television. They're watching all the smoke going up from their boat 500 meters offshore. And they thought, well, this is fucking interesting. What do we do now? Well, we've got a bottle of champagne. Let's crack that. So the two of them sat with glasses of champagne watching Los Angeles go up. And I went like, mental note to you, buy a boat. That's a good fucking strategy when the world goes to shit. But you want to be mobile. You want to be able to move because there's uncertainty. You want to be able to change your situation. So it's worked out kind of good and kind of bad. Is one of the things that landlubbers don't realize is, although the weather gets more severe, and it's getting really bad now at sea, you can avoid the weather. I mean, it's a skill. And so you can outrun hurricanes, and, there's a lot of discussion on techniques for weathering and stuff. But you can survive a lot of weather on a boat. I got caught out now with the McCαιrn. The McCαιrn in 2018 was the first hurricane in the Med, and I thought, okay, well, this is going to be a trend now. I'm expecting more. The reason I'm in the Ionian now is because I don't want to get into McCαιrn again. There are a lot of friends who lost boats and stuff. So anyway, the McCαιrn caught me out because it caught me in Crete, and there was nowhere to run for. So I spent a nasty few days with the eye of that hurricane coming right for me in Heraklion, and prepping for the hurricane. I couldn't run left or right because it came down Multnomah Alley, circled round, gathering heat, and then was forecast. I spent 3 days with it forecast with the eye coming over Heraklion, and 135 knot winds. I was shitting myself, and it passed north and went to Kalamata, and my friends in Kalamata, you should hear their stories about it. But I survived. I hurricane-proofed the boat with other sailors, and that the sailing community is not isolated. It's one of the reasons I'm also here is because of the mutualism. There are a lot of people afloat that are anarchists and have seen and doomers, and they've seen which way this is heading, and they're doing the same thing as me. So there's a community, and basically the boat community. I hurricane, basically got into a hurricane hole and survived it with them. It's a very good way to prep because you have these extensive networks. You're not alone. That's what I encourage people to do. People that go into bunkers are making a big mistake. That the prepping mentality in the States is you arm yourself and you go into a bunker. I'll tell you, that's the worst fucking idea you've ever had. From South Africa, the people that did that, particularly arming yourself, the statistics were that 60% of people were killed with their own weapons, mainly from suicide. So I'm telling you, if you're one of those guys who think you're going to get tin food and arms and going to prep for Mad Max scenario out in, head up to Montana, I'm telling you, don't fucking do it. The kind of decisions you're going to have to make is like, which the order that you shoot your kids in. You go. What happened in South Africa was there was murder, suicides of families, and it's still endemic in the farming community. But if you want to go out in this apocalypse and in that kind of way, just think about it. That night where you have to take out your weapon and shoot your family, and then think about it. Which one do you shoot first? But do you drug them? Do you drug them before you shoot them? How are you going to play out this? But anyway, if your plan is to go in a bunker, you better make sure your wife and kids are up with this plan and know where it ends up. But I'm telling you, you're heading for a fucking nightmare. Don't do it.
Well, I'd just add this caveat that probably you need all sorts, right? You need some on boats, you need some in bunkers, you need some, and you need that kind of dispersal globally right now. And like I say,
very much up with that. Yeah.
But you need to think locally, and you need to think mutually. You need to think group. You need to think support. You don't think individual. That's the main thing to take out of what Hugh was saying. I think for me is the mutual support, the mutual.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and that's what I've been trying to tell people right now. Where everyone, because of the systems that we've built, the mutualism is not the person physically next door to you right now. And right now, that person could be literally. The odds are that person is an ideologue that would cancel you in a microsecond because they feel it's for the greater good. You see it played out on the digital space all the time right now, and so the idea is to network. Take a key from neuroscience, and even if you have to send projections, that are, you take the size of a neuron cell body and you look at its axon length. The scale is enormous compared in terms of where it's trying to reach, etc. in fiber bundles. But we can connect through these fiber bundles, and we can look at we can aggregate data better, or sort of group source we're not sourcing the data, but we're aggregating and analyzing as well. So everyone is taking a bit of the picture that they're seeing and saying, okay, this is what I'm seeing in my corner of the world. So someone put in my chat a little while ago, it's sort of shot by, but it caught at the corner of my eye, was that they've been told that they're going to die from some form of runaway climate nonsense, from since they were a child, and that's what I remember. But instead, what's happened is that they've had their culture subverted by third world immigration, and that's an existential risk as well. And that's something that doesn't get spoken about because, well, again, I would point to the United States sort of taking the lead on this. Is that it's a young country that's struggling with well, what's a country, what's a people's, it's a consensus country, and consensus requires some degree of advanced civilization. We got America was very uniform in its makeup until very, very recently, and had a lot of space, still has a lot of space, but they've weaponized the information aggregation there as well, such that you can't, you don't get sense from people. You just speak to ideologues all the time. And I'm like this, oh, that's not a person that you're speaking to. Are you waving at me here?
No, somebody outside. Yeah, but so I don't see that wokeism as an ideology has much legs. I mean, it's privileged, and I think that the middle class is about to lose its privilege. So it's not going to last much longer than kind of affluence in the bourgeoisie. So basically, it's probably had its day as soon as the food prices start going up, and they're already going up. But basically, they'll get over it quickly in a famine. Basically, there are no wokists in a foxhole, you might say.
Right, but the thing is, they can still have a sting in the tail, right? And so, who the people behind the group-driven ideologies, so let's take an example that everyone can agree on, which is the Bolsheviks in for the Soviet Revolution, right? That's something that people can agree on. Oh, that turned into something pretty bloody horrible, and that was an existential threat to many people, and it was all encompassing. But it wound down eventually, but it was, well, it depends where you want to take your measurement of the swing of the pendulum. But the sort of internal collapse because of the contradictions in face of the libertarian approaches of the West, that was superior at the time. We outcompeted them in the material domain and in the ethics. I guess we still had this idea of sovereignty, and it hadn't been subverted to the point that wokeism has done right now. But I don't know if something like Duginism is gonna kick in, and they've got a bloodlust revenge for what happened to them, right? And the pain that they went through, that side of the equation. And like I say, this comes back all to what's coming down the path with respect to Belt and Road Initiative, how they're going to pivot the world, how they're going to manage populations, and we are global cattle to them right now. We're a resource to be used and abused. And if you're if I'm trying to teach anything right now, it's how to analyze the scientific data such that you're trying to see both sides all the time, rather than running. It would be easy to run away with, oh, it's just eco-health, it's just China. That's the narratives that you're seeing right now. Hoover Institute just had he was on Joe Rogan. Jamie Metzel, who, but he's got links to World Economic Forum, and you're seeing, to me, I'm like, okay, I'm seeing a narrative being made, and Joe Rogan sitting there as part of it just says to me, oh, this is again information psyops that we need to be careful of, that we don't get swept up in, now.
But it's so multifaceted. I mean, look at the Rockefeller Institute and that. They're just fucking armies of these fucking organizations that really have this one world agenda. But yeah, I'm in total agreement with you that I don't agree with Steven Pinker much, but one thing I do agree with him on is that our real danger in collapse is ideologues. It's like the Bolsheviks and that. Those bastards, the communists and Gramsci's long march through the institutions and that. It's the guys that want to force an ideology, and then that's where wokeism comes in. Is the last thing we fucking need is some social warrior agenda while this collapse. It's like, dudes, we've got enough fucking problems. Just
look at the US in the summer. That's what it looks like, and I'm not sure if that's finished yet. What you saw in the summer.
No, it's not. It's just warming up. But here's what I want to ask you is okay. So you're taking on a role that I'm doing, and that's kind of a shamanistic role. You're being a guru for a lot of these people.
Yeah, don't do that with me. You'll get
no. You've got to follow. I mean, how big is your tribe now?
I don't know, like probably I would say 500 to 1,000 people will watch me a day, depending on what I'm doing and who I'm talking to. But,
so that's substantial. So now, where are you going to take this now? Because in your current format, I don't know that it's not built for growth, right?
No, but I'm not aiming for that. It's I think there's a point where once you reach some sort of growth, that becomes inherently addictive. The clout and the ego builder, you just see it all the time. And I've seen it in trying to reach out to people and just say right at the beginning, hey, there's something with SARS-CoV-2 that's impacting the nervous system. This isn't flu, right? And that's played out, and that's why there's 500 to 1,000 people watching me, because they listened to what I was saying on Stefan Molyneux.
By the way, Kevin, I wanted to thank you very much for leading people through reading articles in a right way and research in a right way, paying attention to phrases, to way things are put, to the reference, to the way the study is conducted, because I've been in the medical profession. I know how you can be easily misled reading a study too fast, and how the public...
I did it yesterday. Yeah, right.
But that is precious, because it's education. Thank you.
Yeah, too few people actually know how to read the scientific jargon. I actually didn't know how to read that shit until I went through a couple of years of college, because I was in as a science major for a little bit.
It takes a lifetime. I'm still doing it now, right? There are even within my field, neuroscience. Sometimes I've got to be like, okay, these are things that I'm not. It's outside my wheelhouse, so to speak, and I've got to stop and reappraise what it is that I think that I know, even though I might know the vernacular that they're using. Do I really know it to the level that I'm comfortable with? And what I see right now is you can see a very self-reinforcing negative term within the sciences, within the virology community, because of them buying into this One Health doctrine. Because you know what? That's where the grant money was, right? And now you're seeing that play out in real time. I would argue the same things happened with the environmental sciences as well. And environmental sciences was some of the first to get, that were on the chopping block with respect to the march through the institutions. It's very hard to get wokeism into a laser laboratory, right? Something like geophysics, though, is a different matter when it's about trekking through rainforests and trying to choose your poison. The list is something more sort of anthropological, and then trying to bootstrap that onto cultures and institutions and saying you have to be like this. And at every turn, I see an ideologue everywhere. And if there's just one thing, you know, you summed it up nicely, Hugh. It's like I've been using it a lot since. Precautionary principle, right? You used that word last week. From was it last? It's just a week, right? Since we last spoke. So much happens in a week at the moment. But you said precautionary principle. Apply the precautionary principle in a chaotic environment, because that's what you're seeing now. And there are people that feed off chaos. Or
I do.
So
it's a good time for me. I'm having a ball, but I try not to let people know that. Sometimes I just can't help myself. But so you becoming a teacher, and I'm sure you'll become quite influential. But what's the end game? Where do you wind up? In all of this?
I would just be saying this because they'll take me out. I can't look. The more I sit here and point to things like prions and stuff like that from a precautionary principle, okay, either in the virus itself or within, if you want to go date Michelle Pfeiffer, okay, they will use that right now to slam me into the ground, depending on how it does or doesn't play out, and they'll distort what it is that I'm saying, so that I'll get made irrelevant at some point, right? So if the worst elements of weaponized prions emerge, well, I don't feel like taking a victory lap under such circumstances. And I had a heavy encounter with SARS from Korea. I might be on the way out anyway. So what I would do is I kind of see this as sort of, you know, if something does happen in the short term that I'm recording locally, that my children can still get from that. And the one lesson I would say is this whole idea when I was growing up, you don't want to have kids too early, go to university, do this, do that. What that did was splinter families and essentially made us weaker and more at the whim of these bigger structures that like populations moving around, following capital, all that type of thing. Whereas I would say, like I say, go local, go family. Okay.
You know that stuff was planned, right? You'd be surprised how basically intellectual and forebrained it was. Do you know about Eddie Bernays and all of those
yes,
guys?
Of course. Grab your freedom sticks, ladies. That might be one way for you to get out
freedom
of
focus, yeah.
And Adam Curtis's video too.
I
What's that?
Adam Curtis, the last series of documentaries on the BBC that address the same kind of thing you're referring to there.
Yeah, there's all Eddie. Yeah, there's like Eddie Bernays, and then people like from the Trilateral Commission, which pretty much made the education system make Americans dumb. Yeah.
But beyond One Health, the CFR and these guys have their fingers deep inside the pie, and they're controlling the strings of this marionette. It's absolutely relentless. I mean, the forces arrayed against us are just unbelievable. I mean, I don't think people in the UK in particular get how fearsome and awesome the American military machine is, and there's no boundary between military security and corporate. They just blur in America, so that.
But Hugh, they've gone down. There was the military was ordered. I think it was yesterday. I read it, to defend LGBTQ, and I'll add P rights onto that. Okay, that's your military done. That's your military done. Okay, China's just got to wait. Okay, they're not. Like I say, they want to break.
But here's a good example of why wokeism hasn't got much future. So in general, what happens to peacetime armies is they decay, And all sorts of this bullshit happens. And then you saw it actually during the Gulf War. You have all this feminism and equal rights for gender, and then, it's like, fine. But I'm telling you, you don't want women in frontline trenches. Anarchists in Catalona will tell you they segregated them. It didn't fucking work. You don't want women on a battlefield unless they're doing, dressings and stuff. You can. It doesn't matter about gender equality. However, it's like really. Battlefield isn't a place for gender equality, but peacetime armies forget all this stuff, and so they start, because it's they're on a meal ticket, and everybody in the military and security apparatus, they're just welfare queens, living off tax money, and so then they push and say, like, women are, should be allowed to, fly fighter jets, and they should be allowed to be, grunts with in trenches and stuff, and then what happens is like the Jessica. No, what was her name? Jessica.
I don't know who you mean. Who got captured by, and then they sent in special forces. But
and then basically what happens immediately is they take, some guy on the top says, like, get all the women out of the front lines. That is such bad publicity for the war. That we if we don't bring them all home, then basically they take them out of those out of harm's way. Then basically it's a very bad propaganda coup. So you see how quickly it swings from like peacetime, Grand Queen, hey, these guys have a free meal ticket. Women also need a free meal ticket, and they say, like, yeah, okay, meal ticket ends, now you have to go and get your fucking head blown off. And then it's like, oh no, we can't have women's head blown off, they'll get raped in the front line. And so welcome to reality, and take them out. So basically so traditionally militaries take about 5 years to go to complete horseshit without a battle. So America, one of the reasons why they can keep going with Chomsky's perpetual war is to keep the military on its toes. You need these wars, but in the meantime, this wokist agenda is like creeping through. So the LGBTQ stuff, and then like they'll forget that instantly as soon as the bullets start flying.
Yeah, we know this, but again, this is the precautionary principle. How many bodies are we throwing up against that first wave before we forget that?
That's the expense. That's the expense. Is that basically all this is paid for in blood. So all this nice stuff. I mean, like, Jesus, man, I got so many gay friends and stuff. Is like, I want the best for them, but because I want the best for them, I say, like, we don't want to be doing this shit because it's paid for later in blood. It's there's an old expression in the military, like, sweat on the battlefield saves. Sweat on the training field saves blood on the battlefield. And what we're doing here is basically we are not doing the correct training. We're just going to pieces in terms of military strength and getting to,
So almost like it looks like a deliberate sort of subversive plot to take down the preeminent superpower on the planet. Who I wonder who would want that, right? And this is where
there are a number of strands to it. There are a number of strands, but a lot of it is just straight off short-sightedness and greed. And so once you have a capitalist mindset, and then so on the one hand you have a strategy of like communism and the long march and creeping in through things. But on the other side, you just have, capitalist greed, where it's like, hey, I want a free gravy chain on the taxpayer. So the libertarians and the communists actually have it both right. It's just part of the decay that creeps in a peacetime army from both sides.
Yeah,
but
and this is
anyway.
It's such a crucial point that you just said there, right? That those ideologies that's the 20th century, right? And those are collapsing. And when we know from history, when those things collapse, and it's been accelerated massively within the last year, just at societal level. This is, again, put the environmental aspect out of it. I would argue we have to look at it through a battlefield reference. Dude, you've been in the military, you understand about MBC training and what it is that you're supposed to, how you're supposed to sort of posture yourself right now. And you disperse your forces. You make sure that you've got protection on. You make sure that they're not getting so the contagion can't. You've got fire breaks against contagion that stops it getting and taking out your critical forces. We're not doing it.
In our civilian population, we need fire breaks. So right here in Greece, we've got natural fire breaks because we're on islands. But they're not making quarantine zones or like green zones and free access. Basically, we're not in these bubbles. Like Australia and New Zealand at one stage could have made a quarantine bubble, and they could have gone on their lives pretty easily. But they won't do that. Because we're running up against economics. They're keeping all the infrastructure. So the ferries are going and the planes are still arriving on a fucking island without a hospital. So basically, it's like you cannot do that. You've got to basically disconnect. If we disconnect, we're fine. Everybody goes to the bars. You can basically have deliveries of booze. We're food self-sufficient on these islands. The Greek government is making a spectacular fuck up of a perfect natural situation. I was expecting my part of talking boat strategies. I was expecting the 4 horsemen. So basically, plague is one of them. Now, you really want to be able to find a fucking island and basically island hop. As soon as all of us knew, I'm not going to tell you about my community, but if all of us knew that as soon as fucking plague hits the whole fucking island, we're up anchor and out of there. And fucking, I can't really say this, but I've had such a fucking ball during this pandemic. The previous lockdown I spent in this island that's one of the gems of the world. And I had it to myself with 2 other boats. And it generally, the police turned a blind eye because there were no cases on the island. It was completely cut off. And it just kind of carried on kind of thing with their own life in secret, basically. So it wasn't too overt. But they could have done that on every single Greek island. They didn't do it because of the fucking economics. Because and for a number of other esoteric things is one of the things they're very scared of that I don't think they comes across is they're very scared that they get the machine going again after this. Because people are working remotely from home. That breaks the boss-worker relationship. There are a lot of these. If these kind of lockdowns go on, there are a lot of systemic changes that just happen organically, that people get comfortable in a new way of life. Part of the thing is people are localizing. People, that's what lockdown does. That'll destroy, it's making a mindset that destroys the global economy and the globalist agenda. So they worried about that, getting the machine up again, getting started again. So a lot of the things you see, a lot of the narrative is, let's get back to normal stuff, because it's worrying them that there's more and more inertia building up to getting back to wage slavery on a global scale. And so the world system is falling apart. And so there's this tension between the governments that want to just get the economy going. And
that's why I argue people. I'm trying to stress people, take this chance. This is like nature has given you this chance to decouple from these systems, and it'll be tough, right, for a lot of people. But there's no if you're doing something that's IT based, there's no reason for you being commuting to a day job and engaging in that type of activity, right? Trains should be for trips to the seaside, right? And people who have put in or invested so heavily into the system that they've over leveraged themselves, that they've become the rent seeker types. We have to accept that. Well, not have to accept, but it's better to let nature take its course and let those things wither away. Are you going to see? I would want to see the reintroduction of the industries that were taken away from communities in Europe. Okay, like car manufacture, bring that back, make it more local. But there's no need for every family to have 3-4 cars, right? Make better stuff more locally, and try to and use this time right now to carve out a new niche, right? It's the evolutionary principle in action.
so I've carved out my niche. The bargain I made with myself was I'd carve out my niche and then basically try and do activism and help others, because I'm primarily an accelerationist. I want the opposite to you. I want industrialism to end, because it'll give more chance to people to squeeze through the population bottleneck. The sooner we can actually cut down on environmental destruction, the better off we'll do. It's increasingly becoming a moot point, because we're way past individual action. It doesn't matter if you drive an SUV. At this stage, you can do fucking anything.
If the traffic doesn't move, and nothing, it doesn't. You're just sitting in something more comfy. All right, may as well have something more comfy to sit in than a bone rattler. Okay, I can kind of get that. But you're, like I say, trying to sort of trying to convince people that deindustrialization is as an activist angle of attack. I would just say it's like I said, it's moot. But why? It's just passive now. Okay, the shot's been fired.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's not absolutely certain, but I think the tipping points were passed in 2020, some major ones, and particularly it's all about the Arctic. It's really all about the Arctic in terms of climate, and we're fucked. The fuse has been lit. There's fuck all we can do. You might as well fly and do whatever you were going to do. But from one sense, it is still a question of leaving enough habitat for people to squeak through. But I don't think it's us. I don't think it's white people in urban centers, and I think the Chinese and South Asians they're fucked. They're way more fucked than even white people in the urban West. But
it remains to be seen, right? This is.
It does. It remains to be seen. but the thing that makes me, I think that Westerners have got too much of white people. They've got too much of an ego, and they too individualists. So I think that's not a good strategy for collapse. So I mean the mindset of all these snowflakes is they're not going to survive much longer in a crisis. I see a crisis coming, abrupt climate change, and they're the least well equipped. So basically look at your bank balance and your income, and it's inverse proportion to your bank account whether you're going to survive or not. I think is a fair way to look at it. Is open your fridge, and if it's full of Coca-Cola, you're dead. Especially because Coca-Cola translates to the demographic transition. Basically, if you have as much income as a Chinese or Mexican person, it correlates rather strangely with your diet. You have peak Coca-Cola consumption right at that point, and your diet goes to hell as your income. You get to the demographic transition, about 11 grand a year.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to have to leave you because we've been a while, and I'm actually going to work in my garden because I grow my own food and I need to do stuff. Yeah. So
well, maybe we should round it off. Maybe that is a good time to stop, isn't it?
Meeting. Thank you so much, Kevin. Very grateful that you took the time, and I hope we'll meet you again.
Anytime. Don't worry about F-bombs trying to get through. I like that kind of thing. I like edgy debate, and people need to hear what it is that people are saying. Like I say, someone like you, who's like South African military, who's been through, who knows what shit looks like when things are going tits up. That's valuable. Right, I've got quite a few, well, not quite a few, but a core of South Africans in coming to me, and they're precious, right? Precious because they cut through bullshit, right? And
I'm actually American. I have American citizenship, and I've
I take it all back then. I take it all back.
Yeah, well, I've lived long. I mean, I hated America and the idea of I just got trapped. Oh, so, see you, Sophie. We'll finish soon. But I have an insight into the bigger picture because of the stuff that I've done in America. I've actually lived longer in America than any other country, but I'm kind of like up until my 20s in South Africa, and then in the UK for about 10 years, and the rest in the States, so about 50 years in the States. But
but you understood the South African.
Well, yeah. What my insight is basically, so we're on the path to South Africa. So if you look at South Africa objectively, there's your future. It's front running.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've been saying it for a long time. You want to know where we're going? Look at South Africa. Okay. And
but in this stage, we're going over the brink. You see, what the difference I saw was that we had Mandela and de Klerk, and they saved us going over the brink. And what I feel now is I left South Africa thinking, well, that's the end of that load of shit, and I'll see that again. I'll live in the civilized world. And what I realized was, fuck, America's on, the rest of the world's on the same trajectory, and we're going over the brink. So we came close to a Rwandan-style genocide in South Africa, but the rest of in the world in total, we are going over the brink. We're going to see the stuff we narrowly missed in South Africa. So that's where the lesson ends. I don't see that we can get out of this one.
Well, depends who you listen to.
On that uplifting note, we definitely don't want people to end on a note of hope, because hope is just fucking poisonous. It's slave.
It's
fodder for slaves, man.
We should put that quote: "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here."
Yeah, I'll leave with this. Have kids. There's always hope, and pray to the Lord.
I agree with that. But, hey, we must have a Lord discussion.
All right, I gotta go because my systems are kicking in, and I'm gonna I've gotta go to the bathroom. So
Okay.
All right,
guys, take care,
everybody. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you very much.